Okay, this is the ComancheZOOM for August 20th rather. We had to do a little bit of change to get the program tonight because the original idea of doing the GAMI injectors, we just were not able to put all the pieces together to make it happen tonight. So instead, what we're going to do is complete or go on with the 10 tips for new Comanche pilots. You know, as we say, the rest of the story. Plus, there is a bunch of group deals that are in the wings or about to happen or even actually going to happen now for sure. And we'll start talking about them too. I have allowed you now to all unmute at will so you can talk among yourselves. And I will stop the share so we'll get out of the way. Let's see who's here. And as usual, as CJ would say, you know, key the mic and say who you are, where you are, and what you fly.
Everybody's quiet. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Mike Collini, PA 3066B.
Where are you?
Prescott, Arizona.
Aha. I'm Pete Morris. I have a 1963 250, which is new to me, but it's been around for a while. And I'm based in Danielson, Connecticut.
Well, I will have to disclose that I sold the airplane a year ago, but I did manage to put 10,000 hours on it.
Wow.
And that was my second twin Comanche.
How come you sold it? Was there a motivation for that?
The motivation was I didn't use it enough, quite frankly. If you can't fly an airplane an hour a week, you shouldn't be in it. That was the motivation.
An hour a week would be 52 hours a year. So I think I'm above that number, but not by a lot.
Yeah, well, that was my minimum number to be safe. So I've been a pilot for 52 years, and I'm a flight instructor for 50. So I decided, hey, you can't put at least an hour a week in this airplane. You shouldn't be flying it, because you make a mistake in a twin Comanche, it'll catch you.
Amen. So again, I'll say, as CJ would say, key your mic, say who you are, where you are, and what you fly.
I'll go next. I'm Kevin Thompson. I've got a 250, 1959 250, and I'm out of Marin County in California. And I've had the plane for about 20 years.
Wow.
And you have blue skies behind you.
Blue skies, but right behind that is smoke from all the fires we have.
Jim Peters, Brisbane, Australia, with a twin Comanche since '75.
Seems like there's a lot of twins in Australia. Is that something you notice?
Probably almost equal numbers as far as I can tell, or at least in my group, in the people I mix with, because a lot of them were used for IFR training in the early days.
Yeah.
Hello. Up there. Watch bridge.
I'm Bernie Stumpf. I fly out of Westerly, Rhode Island in the US, and I've owned a Comanche since 1987, but that's not the one I'm flying these days. I've owned this one since 1995. It's been only it's been in Canada, and it's been on the West Coast a couple of times. Most of the long trips I took were to Florida from the East Coast. My longest trip in a Comanche I did with my first Comanche, which was from Nashua, New Hampshire to Fairbanks, Alaska in 1990. And coming back south on the West Coast to Los Angeles, Santa Monica and Los Angeles, met my parents who were still alive in 1990, and then flew east. I took my second oldest daughter as my co-pilot starting on that trip, and then I called my brother-in-law and said, "How would you like a free trip to Alaska?" And he met me in Calgary, Alberta, on the way to Alaska.
Okay, real quick for you
Hey,
guys
guys.
that just joined in. This is what we're doing tonight. We had some difficulty putting together the discussion with Gami about the fuel injectors. The schedules just didn't match up. So we're going to continue with the 10 tips for the new Comanche pilots, the rest of the story. And then CJ has a whole mess of really interesting group buy deals that are happening in the very near future or even right now. So,
In fact, they are announcing today, and it's pretty exciting. We also have updates on all 3 autopilots, including some pretty exciting news.
that's the plan B that we're going with tonight.
It was actually the plan A.
Whatever.
We just got it mixed up. Welcome, everybody. I'm CJ. I fly right now a 180 out of Montpelier in Lebanon when I'm not flying Dad's 260B out of Westerly with Dad. Oh, nice photo, whoever's that is. Well, pop in and say who you are, where you are, and what you fly.
Okay, well, I'll see when I see you. I know where he is. If I can look up his address, I'll head down the road here.
It looks like we got a stuck mic.
And we can probably just call him. Okay?
Pete, can you mute Jim?
I just did.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, if you want to talk, all you got to do is unmute yourself, answer the 3 questions, and then put the mute back on.
Okay, I'll be up. I'm in Fort Sill, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, 1860-50. Temporarily on vacation here in the beautiful Peninsula of Michigan, home stomping grounds. So kind of a vacation Zoom meeting today.
Uh-huh.
Did that come across? Everybody heard that? Because to me, I didn't hear a word he said.
I'd love to hear you retransmit.
Yeah, it was about halfway.
Say again, from vacation?
Greg, that was you, I think.
Probably my headset. I'm gonna turn it off here.
There you go.
That sounded good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the headset that messes up. Anyways, Craig Hammond from Lawton, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, 1962-50. And this week I'm up in Upper Peninsula of Michigan doing this on vacation.
Greg, out of curiosity, what's your N number?
6701 pop. It's on my
I have 6632 pop.
66. Okay.
Welcome and thanks for being here, Greg, especially from vacation. We'll try to keep you entertained and make it worth it.
Oh, yep.
It's got to be better than the Democratic Convention.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's the end of my political jokes.
Yeah, and I have no comment.
All right.
And somebody else had just started to jump in, and we stepped on you. So if you want to hop back in. Otherwise, I'm calling on victims. Keith Steiner.
Yeah,
You can
Lauren,
unmute.
if
Yep,
Lauren's
and learn.
talking, it didn't come through at all.
Hey guys, this is Keith. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Loud and clear.
Hey, great. Hey, so Keith Steiner, I'm probably the youngest Comanche owner here as far as time owning an airplane. So I just got 9321 Papa, brought her down from Tennessee a couple months ago, and only got about 10 hours in her before I handed her over to Joe and LJ at Zephyr Hills, and she's in pieces. So 9321 Papa is going to be based in Elsinore Air Park, Alabama, at my hangar that I'm building on a newly created air park. So 2,600 foot grass runway, and that's going to be home for her. So glad to be here. Have already taken advantage of this great forum, using some of the wonderful knowledge in the rebuild of this airplane, and really looking forward to putting a lot of hours on it with my family in the years to come.
Great to have you.
Welcome and congratulations. And let me just ask, Bernie Stumpf, you want to go ahead and tell the tail number of the 260C you had? And then if John Futter is here, you want to say the tail number of the 260C you've got?
Okay, it's Bernie speaking. I used to own a Comanche. Tail number was November 9322 Papa, and I owned it until 1994.
Brilliant. And John Futter, are you here? Nope, not yet. Okay, so I'm just going to say for him, John Futter has 9317 Pop. So you got two people who owned your siblings, close, almost twin C's, and grab their names if you got any questions. They may be able to help you. And you can just message me if you need their contact info.
Thanks, CJ.
But yeah, congratulations again. What a great bird. Okay, sorry everybody. Who else can we put on the spot? Kevin Thompson, have you already said hello?
I have, but I can go again.
Feel free.
Kevin Thompson, I've got a 59-250, and I fly out of Nosfield, which is Marin County, California.
Oh, right, you were early on. Welcome and thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, it's great. These meetings are awesome. It's the first time I've made it on one because they start at 4 o'clock my time. But I've been watching all the Zoom recordings, so thanks for doing that.
Oh, great. Glad to have you here. Thanks for being here. All right, I'm going to nail you. Larry and Mackie, I haven't seen your names before. Welcome, and tell us who you are, where you are, and what you fly.
Nobody home.
Well, it's hard to find the unmute button sometimes if you're new. So I'm going to give them a second to find it. And Lauren, you want to jump in?
Hey, this is Lonnie. Lauren is downstairs in the kitchen.
Awesome.
But yeah, this is Fly 180, as you see right here, 1960. We haven't been flying her as much as we like, but we just got the new Microsoft Flight Simulator. What was it, the 18th? 3 days ago, and it is amazing. We're like to see a Comanche as one of the airplanes, but it has airliners, and it's the most amazing thing. If anybody's ever would like to check out the simulator, it's pretty good. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, Lonnie, hi to Lauren when she gets back, and welcome and thanks for being here. Actually, A2A Simulations does an amazing 250 sim, and they have a group buy going on as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Don't let me forget. Welcome here. And Ben, just saw your message that your mic isn't working. Welcome and thanks for being here. Let's see. jump in if you want to, but otherwise I'm just gonna keep going down. Paul, you want to pop in?
Hello, everyone. This is Hans. Come.
Hey, Hans Pittner, how are you?
Good, CJ. Fine, thank you.
Yep, and you are where and flying what? Since I know you've got two.
Oh, yeah. Having a lot of fun now flying. But I'm going up. I'll see you on Saturday, I trust, down in Sky Manor.
Absolutely, and I happen to know Hans at the moment has a 180 and a very special 260B out of Sullivan County. Is that right, or Orange?
Orange County.
Yep. Good deal. Well, thanks for being here, Hans. And Hans, by the way, is a CFI who owns two Comanches and teaches in them. So if you're in the New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut area, he is one of your choices. And we definitely recommend, especially in the top 10 tip for new Comanche owners, to get a good transition training with a Comanche driver, because they'll get you through the very few areas where our airplanes are, shall we say, special. Thanks for being here, Hans.
Yes, and if anybody wants to reach out, just give me a call. I'll be happy to go flying.
Yeah, we're pretty blessed. We've got Hans and a couple other great people in the Northeast.
Hans,
Feel free to.
Hans, maybe you can put your name and phone number in the chat box.
It's a good idea, Peter. I will. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, if you're an instructor in Comanches, feel free to put your name and number in the chat box. We don't consider that advertising that as a service, because one of the things that we noted in doing the analysis of accident rates is that one of the best things you can do is to both transition train with somebody who really specializes in the Comanche, and then get regular recurrent type training. I'm going to shut up now and let people jump in and say who you are, and where you're from. Any quiet spot, just like ATC.
Hi, CJ. This is Paul Heck. I'm in Northern California at Sonoma County, Charles Schultz Airport. It's about 20 miles north of Kevin there at Noss Field. And I'm a Comanche driver for about 25 years. And I've got 5368 Papa, 1958 250.
Welcome and thanks for being here. Well done.
I'm going to chime in. I have 5468 Papa. I think I've seen your plane up in Santa Rosa.
Yeah, I've heard you in the pattern too. I think they get us confused from time to time.
Yeah, I think they do. Good meeting you on.
Yeah. We've been a bomber base now for the fire CDF, the fire guys, because of all the fires going on around here.
Yeah, it's pretty bad up there.
Yeah, it's horrible, and I don't see it getting any better. It seems like it's just an annual event around here.
Yeah, it's a little early this year.
Yeah, I was hoping to wait for a while, but anyway, the rest of you guys, you probably all got your own problems, but we're in Northern California. Just look at the map.
One question that I've always had, there was an extensive discussion about flying during volcanic eruptions. Are there any A&Ps who can jump in about flying in the smoke of fires? I mean, obviously we have lots and lots of airplanes used in fire prevention, but is there anything we should worry about if we fly in an area of thick smoke? I know Mike might have an opinion on that. Mike Kalini, because he's an A&P and a longtime Comanche driver.
I am not an A&P.
My apologies.
I'm a long-time Comanche driver, and I never mentioned any of this stuff. I'll just tell you, the advanced aviation training device was my idea. I sold it to the FAA. I started a company called Flight Simulators, and Comanche was one of our models, obviously, because I had two. I had a 1959 and I had a 1966. But anyway, that's it. I know a lot about simulation. I know a lot about the Comanche, not because I'm a big, brilliant, genius kind of guy, because I've been doing it for 50 years. So if anybody has any questions about the twin Comanche, I would consider myself knowledgeable about that aircraft after 10,000 hours in it, and that's it. simulate. You mentioned simulation, and that's why I talked about it. Microsoft Simulator. Bruce Willis was not Bruce Willis. Williams. Bruce Williams ran Microsoft Flight Simulator, and when I came up with the idea of the AATD, he's the guy I called at Microsoft, because we're talking a long time ago. Let's see, 1999, and I said, I have this idea. I want to use your software to run my simulation, and all I really need out of you is your graphics. And he allowed me to do that, and we came up with the Advanced Aviation Training Device, which I then went to the FAA and said, we'd like to, propose this, and we went through a lot of crap, but at the end of the day, we did make it happen. So that's how the Advanced Aviation Training Device occurred. The only thing I have to say about it, after all of that kind of nonsense going with the FAA, is I know a lot about the FAA. I know a lot about regulations. I know a lot about the twin Comanche. The 59 I had, I got rid of. That's a terrible term to say, but I didn't need a 59 Comanche and my 66. But that's my background. So I have a lot of background, and if I can help anybody, good. I'll do that. I have no problem with it. And I'm only 75, and I still work 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. So that's it. That's my story. Take advantage of it, or just tell me to get lost. It doesn't matter. I'm a New Yorker.
I think what I'm going to do here is put up our help needed thing as a share, but you guys can still talk over it. No problem with that.
I'd like to add in. My name is Richard. Do you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh,
I
hey.
can hear.
All right. Well, just wanted to say I'm a New Yorker as well. I was born in New York City. I live in the Tampa St. Pete area. I live about a stone throw from Cape High, Clearwater Airport. I don't know much about Comanches. Very interested in the subject. Never flown in a Comanche. Been in quite a few other ones. Bonanzas, Moonies. I learned in the Cessna. And I got my primary in a J3 Cub and in a Roca Champ on at 48 X-ray down in Manatee Airport. And I've always had an interest in aviation, and that's something that I'll probably have for a long time. It's an expensive hobby, but I'm just taking it day by day and just learning as I can go along. Just interested in if there's any CFIs in the Florida area, in the Tampa St. Pete area, that maybe I can connect with. That'll teach me in Comanches.
Welcome, Richard. Good to see you on. And I think I can connect you with a bunch of, oh yeah, no, welcome to be here. We might be able to connect you with a few people. Message me. There's a passel of them out of St. Pete.
Okay.
I want to give my wife Lauren credit for doing this amazing Northern Lights graphic. Northern Lights is on our bucket list, and we just hope to experience that at some time. I have no idea how she did it, but it looks pretty cool.
Lonnie, I was totally wondering, so we're going to put you on the spot and have Lauren come on the next one and say, here's how to do this, because I've had a bunch of us are like, hey, I need that background for my airplane. Am I right?
I have no idea. She's the artist.
Well, welcome. And pop in, everybody. Who you are, where you are, what you fly. Otherwise, I'm going to call on you. Let's see, who have we never heard from? Tim H., you're a mystery. And Lyle after Tim. If you, oh, I think Lyle doesn't have a mic. Tim H, are you able to unmute and introduce yourself? I know finding these mics can be really fun. And Loop, have you seen? If I've not massacred your name.
Well, that's pretty close. You hear me okay though?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. I'm in Northern California also breathing smoke today. And my twin Comanche is based in Watsonville. And I've had it about 7, 8 years maybe. I've been flying pilot since 1956, most of the time commercially, but I've been retired now for quite a while. And I used it for Angel Flight West for a while. The airplane was very enjoyable, but I've retired from that too now.
Well, welcome. And thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. And let's see, we've got a couple of people who just messaged in. Including sorry, a couple of CFIs that posted in. My bad. Pat Kiefer from Pat, do you want to hop on and introduce yourself? And Alan, is that Alan Sherman, Alan S?
Yep, it is.
Hi, it's Alan. Yeah, hi. Hi, CJ. How are you?
Good, welcome. Thanks for being here. You want to introduce yourself, who you are, where you are, and what you fly?
Yeah, well, I was flying Papa until Pete took it over about 8 months ago. But I had the Piper Comanche for 27 years, flying out of Princeton, 3-9 in November. Been flying about 35 years. Was a member of ICS until recently, for some obvious reasons that many of you probably are aware of. But I am glad to be a member of this tribe, and I hope to keep my membership going, and maybe there'll be another Comanche in the future.
Welcome, and we sure hope so, because yours that Pete and Nunn now have is gorgeous, and we figure anybody who leaves a Comanche in that kind of shape, we hope you have another one in the future. Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Sure. You see, Jay, I know that Zach doesn't seem to be on this particular conference, but I'm wondering if his fly-in is still moving forward. I mean, that would be just great if we can all get together again. It's been too long.
Yep. So that fly-in is moving forward, and the big gating factor on that was his airport chose that originally it was, look, we were aiming for September. The airport suddenly chose to completely redo one of the runways, and then there's a big soaring group, and so it's now still scheduled for October, and it's scheduled late enough in October to provide the airport a couple of weeks of slip time. If it doesn't slip, and if all goes well, the weather's beautiful, and everybody should put Seymour, Indiana, which is kind of in the middle of the country, so equally inconvenient for all of us except those in the middle. But it's an easy flight out from almost anywhere, actually. Just plan on 6 to 8 hours for if you're really on the remote ends, and it should be pretty interesting. Seymour, Indiana, which is KSER, is interesting in part because it is a ginormous World War II staging base. And so it's got 2 really long runways that butt up against each other and lots of ramp space for airplanes. In fact, it was used as a staging ground for a missing man flight, formation flight, that Pat Donovan did with a couple of other Comanche drivers in honor of one of our past ICS vice presidents. Pat, do you want to just quickly summarize? We're about to start, but do you want to quickly summarize the way you set up that missing man formation flight on KSER?
Well, it was nothing in particular. Very spontaneous to memorialize Zach Grant's father, when he passed away. And we were just able to put it together in a couple days' notice.
But the reason KSER was so essential is that although everybody had had past formation flying experience, which is don't do a missing man formation if you haven't got formation experience in the Comanche, because they're great airplanes and they're formation flying with Bonanzas and Moonies in their formation groups, but they are there's less visibility upwards in the Comanche than in some other types commonly used for formation. In any case, Pat and the other folks doing this missing man formation were able to lay the aircraft out in the right distances from each other, and because the ramp space was so generous, and just make sure everybody was knew where they were going to be and what it was going to look like. So that was cool. Looks like we are at 7:30. So Pete, I'm over to you.
Well, actually, it's right back to you. The topic of the night, as we have been saying, is the 10 tips for new pilots, second edition and or the rest of the story. And it was very, very popular when we did that last week. We got through, I think we got actually through 6 of them with a fair amount of discussion, which left 4 that didn't even get really talked about. Plus we have another 9 or so that we've come up with since then. So here we are. And CJ, it's back to you.
Alrighty, and Pete, are you bringing up that Brizo from before?
I will do that right now.
Alrighty, so before we jump into the top 10 tips, I am going to ask Hans Newbert, are you still there and able to unmute, Hans? Because Hans pointed out a piece of misinformation or just error. Yep. Hans, we had said something that wasn't quite right, and I think we had said or implied that in the absence of the gear transmission, we had said something about bungees and over center that was incorrect. And so when we had that discussion, and I had it again with another person who does a lot with gear, would you, sorry to put you on the spot, but would you be willing to talk a little bit about gear transmission, gear conduits, bungees, and over center, and what happens when you do an emergency gear extension and then land?
I can do that. Are you hearing me? You should.
Loud and clear. Terrific sound.
Okay. The bungee's purpose is to reduce the load on the gear motor and transmission during the up cycle. That's the purpose of the bungee. And the difference is, when they're new, is 250 pounds of load. Now, the second part of the problem is, I just posted some stuff on Delphi. There's a timing bar that you have to use. And what that timing bar does is replaces the gear motor transmission temporarily until you get the rod end from the nose gear properly positioned so the timing bar will engage. What that does is locate the transmission such that when you go gear up, you don't run into the front bulkhead and not have a full gear retraction. Also, it takes it on the down cycle. It is possible to run out of thread on the transmission, and you may not get a full over center. So having that transmission at the right location, as determined by the timing bar, is very important. And that's a one-time adjustment. And that adjustment is made nose gear down and over center and locked. It's easier if you have the rod ends on the conduits at the gear well removed. It just makes it easier. Then the preload on the conduits is what makes the gear go over center. And the preload is basically, the conduits are acting like real long springs, compression springs. And when the nose gear goes down over center, The conduits are now put in compression. They push on the drag link, or that triangular shaped part, and force the gear linkage to go over center and hold it there. Now, the adjustment for that is, in my opinion, I use a bathroom scale, a small hydraulic jack I got from Harbor Freight, and a tube, or whatever it takes. A stick will work. And I have a dial indicator with a magnetic base. I attach that to the landing gear tube, the chrome tube. Put the dial indicator at the pivot point, and then I run the jack, touching at the same point now, just sidestep it just a touch so you get a little clearance. And my opinion is when you jack up 50 pounds on the scale, that pivot point should move no more than 50 thousandths. Now, what it's saying is it takes 50 pounds to just move it 50 thousandths against the conduit preload. If it's looser than that, you take the risk of perhaps a gear collapse with the transmission off. In other words, an emergency landing. So those three things I think are important. Bungee only helps the gear up. You do the timing bar to set the nose gear in the right position, and then finally do the rod end adjustment at the main gear welds to get the preload. And what happens is, when it's set up right, when the gear goes down over center, you'll feel it in the feet. Now, the last thing that has to be looked at are the steering rollers. The steering rollers cannot touch the steering arm on the nose gear before the nose gear is over center. If those rollers are too large, it will prevent the nose gear from going over center. So the right way to adjust those rollers is you measure the roller diameters with a micrometer, then you get feeler gauges or whatever it takes to determine the gap. When one roller is touching, what is the gap to the other roller? Then you just you go to a machine shop and say, we need to make new rollers. And I've approved a drawing for that you can use as approved data to make your own rollers. And you basically, the answer is basically, you measure the two rollers with a micrometer, you measure the gap, you add all three numbers together, subtract 10 thousandths, divide by 2, and that's your new roller diameter. If anybody wants that drawing, I can send it to CJ and put it on the website, whatever. But I did that years ago.
Hans, we would love that. And in addition, Matthew Aaron Smith, are you on tonight? Okay, so Matthew Aaron Smith is doing the Docs Online project, and if it's okay with you, in the Northeast is the mirror site. So what we'd love to do is get that drawing. We'll create a special section and we'll put it in our documents area, but we'll also have Matthew Smith put it in the Comanche Docs Online.
Okay, I'll do that when we're done tonight.
Fantastic.
I'll just send it. I'll send it, and then you can send it to wherever it goes.
Brilliant.
Okay.
We will make it happen.
What happens is, if the gap is too large on the steering rollers, you get a lot of shaking. The shimmy damper really doesn't take that out. You've got to get the gap on the rollers with the gear down, or the 10 thousandths comes from the fact that when you're up on jacks, there's no pressure on the engine mount. Okay. When the airplane's back on the ground, that 10 thousandths gap disappears, and you'll wind up with those rollers just kiss the steering arm, which is what you want. So anyway, I'll take care of it after we're done.
Brilliant. One other thing that probably should be discussed for new Comanche drivers and for some of us older Comanche drivers, when you've done an emergency gear extension and your gear transmission is therefore disconnected, and therefore your conduit cables are no longer pulling on your gear legs, what should those of us who don't necessarily think about this too much do when we get on the ground successfully with our gear in the emergency gear extension position? Like, don't, well, the big thing I've been told is don't side load your gear. It is not anywhere near as down and locked as it is with the gear transmission motor attached.
If the gear is properly set up with the preload on the conduits to provide over center load, you don't have to worry a thing. Once that gear goes over center and you have preload on the main gear, it's safe. You don't have to worry. But there have been many cases of if you just have the airplane on jacks and you push on the main gear toggle with your thumb and it flops around. I mean, that's not a preload. It's improperly adjusted. When that nose gear goes over center, it'll take it out of your hand. Well, when I did the video, we were messing around with that. It just, when you get it close to over center, those two springs just grab that nose gear out of your hand and it bangs into place. And that over center on the nose gear with the proper adjustment on the conduits forces the main gears to go over center. You don't want any play, and in the main gear, that we call that the drag link. It's the triangular shaped piece with the rod and the rod end on the end. We call that the drag link. That drag link has to be over center in order to be safe.
So when the gear is down in emergency gear extension, as long as it's properly rigged, all of the people telling me, don't side load, turn off the runway really slowly and carefully, it's actually not that bad, Hans?
Nope, it's not a problem. If it's properly adjusted, you have nothing to worry about.
Great. Okay. And then I guess the only other question is, what if you're doing the emergency gear extension because your gear is not not properly adjusted and therefore something went wrong and it got half up or half down?
Well, at the Tacoma yearly ICS thing, they had a 180 on jacks for me, and the owner was helping me. But just by pushing with my two fingers on the nose gear over center, I could retract the nose gear. And I showed it to him. I mean, that's not a good adjustment. You got to know how to do it, and has to be checked every year. The gear collapse I saw at Cable Airport. The gear was down. He made a decent landing. Halfway in his roll, the nose gear collapsed, and down he went, and it took the main gears with it. I mean, that's pretty common. Got to learn how to adjust that gear and keep it that way. And if you do that, you'll have no problems. And the bungee is not going to it will not put the main gears over center. It only brings them in line, a straight line, not over center. Over center has to come from the conduit compression. Anyway, I think I'm taking time away from whoever's making the presentation.
That's me, but because this one is way more interactive than usual, and because, so Hans Newbert, everybody, is a DER who, with another expert, created the 1,000-hour AD DVD, which is a super detailed, walks you through how to do the whole 1,000-hour gear AD. And part of why I asked Hans to speak to this is because one of the two major, well, the two top areas for Comanches to get damaged, it virtually never creates any injuries to pilots or passengers, but one of the two top areas where our Comanches get injured is landing gear misadjustments and obviously failure to extend the gear. So one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to this is because there's a lot of discussion around emergency gear extensions and what to, what happens afterwards. And so a lot of time was spent at the last top 10 tips for new Comanche owners discussing, making sure that you do the emergency gear extension on the ground because if you do it in the air, your gear is not quite as strong as it is. So I take the chance. And the second thing is how to reset the release, because if you ever do need to do the emergency gear extension, you may find yourself far from home and at an airport where people don't know how to reset the gear release. So thus the point 4 here.
Incidentally, I'm a DER. I was delegated in 1986. For the people that are online, I don't know if you know what I do. I'm delegated in Part 23, Part 25, 27, 29 structures, and I'm authorized in repair and alteration. So when I sign the form that I have to use, it's approved data. It's not acceptable data, it's approved data. And that's what I do. And I'm trying to help Comanche people, since I have one myself, as much as possible. Item 5 here. Over the years, I've owned my airplane 32 years. I think I've done about 6 emergency extensions for one reason or another. Not a problem. If I'm on the co-pilot side and somebody else had to put it down, I can reconnect it up in the air. It's not that difficult. Takes a little practice, but you can get it. It is recommended that you reconnect on the ground. It's a lot easier to get it done that way. Certainly, my IA makes me do an emergency extension every year at the annual, and then while it's on jacks, obviously. So I have to do a gear extension just to show that I know how to do it and everything works. The big thing there is, does it all work? And the big thing I want to emphasize with that is, you do not let go of that Johnson bar handle when the gear goes down. You hold on to it and let that gear come down nice and gentle. Otherwise, you will find, if you do that a few times, you will find the pivot pins on the pivot point, which is attached to the main spar. Those steel pivot pins will crack, and that's a subject of another AD. And that's also a 1,000-hour AD. And I recommend that when you do the main gear pivot pins, you also do the nose gear. There have been cases where the nose gear fitting had a crack and broke, and there was a gear up landing. And then finally, I'm going to get off here. Finally, I lost my thought here.
Well, you get that back. Are these are the swivel pins, right, Hans, that may crack?
It's the pin that goes into the triangular shaped part that's bolted to the spar bottom cap.
And they look like a kind of a flattened shoulder thing with a head sticking out, right? The swivel pin, 1000-hour swivel pin 80. Yep. So the reason that I just want to give you an actual cost to what Hans said. So if you do your emergency gear extension on jacks and you don't catch your gear, as Hans said, and you can either have somebody underneath catching the gear as it comes down, it doesn't come down that hard as long as you're ready for it, or hold on to the Johnson bar, as Hans said, so that it doesn't go slamming down. So having just gone through the 1000-hour swivel pin AD and having had to replace both of them, expect to pay at least $500 for a pair unless Webco has again started making their own. So it is somewhat painful to replace them. Easier to just to not crack them in the first place. Go ahead.
This is Pat. I'd also like to strongly urge people that if you have to do a for real extinction in the air, that you keep all your fingers and feet, etc., away from that Johnson bar when you go to land, because there is no way that you are going to be able to help hold that gear down in place. If it's going to come up, it's going to come up with such force that you're going to be physically harmed if you're trying to hold that Johnson bar forward.
That is a helpful hint that I had never heard before, Pat. Thank you for putting that in. Pat Donovan is a past ICS president and been around these birds for a long time. Thanks for putting that in. Any other great thoughts on emergency gear extensions from people here that might help those of us who are either new or old Comanche owners?
Yeah, one thought I had. When you do an emergency gear extension, either on jacks or in the air, on a twin, the bar is inserted. On the singles, it's already attached. I lean on the bar to try to unload as much load as I can before I lift the red handle. The thing with the red handle is all of the weight of the gear is on the exterior cylinder that has to move. And the weight of the gear is, I've not weighed it, but I suspect it's in the order of 150 pounds. You lift that red handle and bend any of those linkages, the 4-bar link, if they get bent, you're going to have a serious problem.
J'étais en train de suivre une espèce de cours sur le Comanche. Tous les fois, il y a une espèce de cours sur les Comanche. Puis, ils prennent des sujets différents d'une fois à l'autre. Puis, je suis en train.
Anyway, I'm done.
That is really helpful. So lean on that bar before releasing the red handle, because the weight of the gear is on the, did you say the exterior cylinder? And if that gets bent, you're in trouble?
Well, you're trying to move the exterior cylinder on the transmission. All of the weight of the gear is hanging on that piece that has to slide. So I unload, I try to do my best to unload the weight by pushing down on the Johnson bar, so it makes it easier to slide.
Yeah, kind of like think mousetrap.
Yeah, that's helpful. The gear transmission motor, everybody, is a little bit scarce. And I mean, we have them, but it is nice to do anything we can to preserve them, because they're somewhat pricey and you have to wait to get them put back in your airplane, obviously. So be nice to them and they will be nice to you. I have a hint that just came up on, so if you do your 1000-hour gear AD and your nose gear downlink springs, which are the twin springs, you should definitely have 2 of them on your nose gear. In fact, everybody after this, go out and look at your airplane. If you don't have 2 springs side by side in your nose gear when it's sitting down on the ground, go get another spring from Matt Kirk at ComancheGear.com, because you definitely want to have 2, and some airplanes only have 1. It's rare now, but it still might be out there. Anyways, if you turned out to need to replace your nose gear downlink springs, they are very firm little buggers, obviously, because they're super strong. And I just watched a very experienced A&P swear and sweat. And I called Matt Kirk and I was like, how do you do this? And Matt said, I get under the airplane, because he's not a big guy. And he said, I get under the airplane and I break the nose gear so it starts to come up under the airplane. And I cradle it in my lap and lift it up. And he said that will release and cause enough slack. And you may also want to, there's a little, you'll see a little, well, anyways, you'll see a little obvious thing up there that's a straight bar that you can unscrew to let something related to those, sorry, this isn't very precise, but to those two nose gear downlink springs swivel a little bit. But if you scoop it up and put it in your lap, then it's actually really easy to place the nose gear downlink springs into the holes in which they go. And if you don't do that, then you expect to do a lot of sweating and swearing and possibly stretch and bend your nose gear downlink springs, which voids the whole point, which is that they're supposed to take a lot of the weight pressure off of your nose gear. Hans, that might be in your video. I don't recall if it is or not.
Well, I remember when we took the nose gear off, we had to take the springs out as well. So it's not real hard to do.
No, but if you don't know how to do it, it's really hard, because I just watched two guys have a real interesting time doing it. And that's why I was like, aha, even some very experienced people don't know. And yes, that is definitely done well on jacks, because the whole 1,000-hour gear AD needs to be done on jacks. Any questions or comments before we move on? Cool. I expect the whole fleet, or at least everybody here, to have perfectly rigged landing gear from here on in. And I will say that Hans's 1,000-hour gear AD DVD, and we've got 5 requests for your DVD, Hans, if you want to ship us a box. Hans wanted to make sure that those were available to the fleet, because they are a key to the survival. I mean, seriously, I mean, this is one of 2 huge things that kill Comanches. So please make sure your 1,000-hour gear AD is done, that your gear is rigged properly. Hans's DVD is only $20 plus shipping and handling. And that's his cost to make it. And then we just pass them along. And so feel free to let us know if you need it. Just go ahead and just put your comments in the chat window, or text a request to 617-816-8766, and we will make sure that we get in contact with you. As long as you give us your contact information, we'll get in contact with you to get you a 1,000-hour gear AD DVD. You can also get it from the ICS website. It's a little bit more there, but that's another option. Okay, Pete, let's move on.
Tell me when to stop.
Okay, sounds good. I had, let's see, I had hoped, now Malcolm Dickinson was going to speak to this, and I think I just want to, but he was not able to come tonight because he's actually being sent off for training in another regional jet, because he's now flying for the airlines. The good news is, looks like the airlines are still training their pilots, so the industry is still alive. The bad news is that Malcolm is not here. However, the reason for doing this is mainly to learn your individual aircraft's ideal RPM and manifold pressure power settings at your favorite altitudes, because it gives you the best efficiency. The other thing that came up at the last top 10 tips was an interesting discussion for carbureted aircraft. And this also came up a little bit with the Surefly presentation on being able to use the throttle plate linkage to help with running carbureted engines more efficiently with a tighter timing and therefore power I'm not saying this right, but like timing enough for power distribution, it essentially gives you better power out of your engine. So carbureted engines, unlike fuel injected engines found in the 260Bs and Cs and some of the 260s and a very few 250s, those you can do things like put gamies on them to tighten up the timings and where each cylinder is going to provide max power. But in the carbureted airplanes, we can't do that. And so I would love to come back to that discussion at some point with a detailed thing. But before we move on, is there anybody here who can speak to that use of that, just jiggering the throttle plate in the carbureted engine to get better performance? We have a commitment to come back to that because there was a modification that was called the M-type carburetor, and there was an interesting back-end discussion on that.
On this particular
So
topic,
go ahead.
on this topic, there was a pilot tips thing from AOPA just recently, like this week, about this same kind of thing. What they were suggesting is that you go up with an instructor or on your own, set your plane up at a particular cruise speed, whatever, any attitude that you want, and then take a picture of the panel. And then when you get on the ground, look at the pictures to see what your settings were. And it seems to me like a very straightforward way of being able to fill in the blanks on a chart for this kind of stuff.
Brilliant. Is that something that we could grab and post, Pete, in the document section of the northeastcomanche.org website?
Actually, I have a PDF of that presentation. So yeah, it could be done.
Brilliant. Okay, it looks like us and Matthew.
CJ?
Yep.
Hey, it's Greg. How are you doing?
Hey, welcome.
CJ, I can speak a little bit about the carburation on the 0540 and the optimal settings, if you want me to talk about it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We're trying to keep everything to 10 minutes. We spent a little more time on gear just because it kills our airplanes. But by all means.
I'll make it short and sweet. This would really only help if you had a really good engine monitor that you can monitor CHTs and EGTs. The carburetor has a valve, a flap in it. It's called a butterfly. And when it's wide open throttle, it's parallel to the airflow going up the carburetor into the plenums. And at that point, you don't know how the distribution of fuel is going through your six intake tubes. And the only way of telling that is by looking at your temperatures, your CHTs. What you can do is leave your mixture alone and change slowly your butterfly. The butterfly is going to now angle slightly, and it's going to disrupt the flow of air going into the intake tubes. It's going to change, I won't say disrupt, I'm going to say change the airflow going into the intake tubes. That may or may not change the CHTs, and it probably will happen fairly quickly. That's really the only way. You can't, gammy injectors are obviously non-existent on a carbureted engine. So the only way you can change or try to equalize the CHT is by varying the angle of the butterfly in the carburetor. And that's it. It's pretty simple, but you can really only do it if you have a good engine monitor. And if you have something that has a recording capability, such as a JPI, you can look at those and when you're on the ground, and you'll know that you did make a difference. But if you're on a long cross country, optimum time to do it. And it's not going to change your horsepower output very much at all, if any, at altitude, because your air intake, your air availability is much less anyway.
Well done.
CJ, a comment?
Please go ahead. Is that Hank?
Yeah, that's Hank.
That's Hank Spellman.
My experience has been on my 250, 1959 250, 0540 A1, A5. that if I go to full throttle, get set up, get leaned out, and then cut the manifold pressure by only 1/10 of an inch, I can readjust the carburetor or the mixture control and pick up 1.5 miles, sometimes even 2 miles an hour.
You got my attention.
So essentially what you're saying is by tweaking it a little bit, you're running it a little bit leaner.
That's right.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I should have said fuel flow. The speed actually falls just a little bit, but the fuel flow goes down a noticeable amount.
So you're getting more speed with less fuel?
No, I lose a tiny bit of speed. I'm sorry, I totally misspoke. I lose a tiny bit of speed. You can hardly detect it, but the fuel flow goes down a couple of tenths of a gallon at least.
Hank, are you using an engine monitor?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
What kind? So you're basically you're trying to. Are you running lean of peak?
No, my engine won't run lean of peak.
Okay, okay, but you're leaning it so you're not full rich, or too rich, not full rich, too rich.
Actually, I am a little bit rich of peak.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But it's finding just how far you can push it before you start getting an occasional miss.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you get that little bump and you wonder what it is.
Yeah.
Are
you?
Go ahead.
Are you monitoring your CHTs at that point?
I don't have to in my airplane. I am happy when I see 350. Otherwise, it's too cold.
Sure, sure. But if you can watch all 6 at a time and they're close, fairly close on a carbureted engine, that's the idea behind adjusting the manifold pressure or the carburetor. Put it this way: the carburetor butterfly angle, and that's what you're doing when you adjust the manifold pressure.
That's right. Just cut it back, and that eddy in there improves the fuel distribution.
Yep.
So to help those of us who are trying to follow along, what is the sequence that you're using, Hank, to get this nice improvement in fuel burn?
Move lean to just the point where you're getting an occasional miss, richen very slightly, because the occasional miss kind of bothers me. The engine doesn't like it, and I kind of depend on that engine. Then pull the throttle back no more than 1/10 of an inch of manifold pressure. I've got gauges that read in 1/10 of an inch, so I can do that. Anyway, and I find that improves the distribution enough that I can lean, and the cylinder that was missing gets enough more fuel that it doesn't miss. Of course, I don't really know which cylinder that is, but it's one of them. Now, the other thing that's peculiar on my airplane is that the left side runs higher cylinder head temperature than the right side. They're all pretty close, except the right side is lower or up. I forget which side it is. They're all pretty well clustered on the same side of the engine, but 20 degrees or more different from the other side.
Interesting. Thanks, everybody. The reason this is helpful is that for those of you who have fuel-injected engines, GAMIs are a terrific option if you'd like. For those of us who have carbureted engines, this is a tweak that we can use that Jason of Surefly mentioned, And I wasn't sure we could use it on our carbureted engines, and then we had a very animated discussion on that. So thank you everybody who just chimed in on this. Does anybody, and the reason this is different is normally we just run wide open throttle everywhere. And the tweak that Hank and Greg and I suspect Pete just mentioned is that we end up coming just a tiny bit back from wide open throttle with that reduction in throttle to no more than 1/10 of an inch of manifold pressure. I'm definitely going to go up and try it. Any questions or comments?
Well, CJ, I found that in my 180 at cruise, if I pull back the throttle about 1/4 inch, I don't seem to lose any manifold pressures, but my EGTs almost completely equalize, which allows me to lean further. But I save 1/2 gallon per hour and 0 change in speed with 1/2 gallon per hour better economy.
Sounds like
has something to do with the Ritchie circuit. I hear. I don't know.
Yeah.
it sounds like the butterfly introduces a bit of turbulence, which creates better atomization. And
That's
better
correct.
Yeah. And better distribution. If the butterfly isn't completely parallel, there's a little bit of turbulence.
Yep, that's correct.
I agree.
CJ, one other comment. You brought up the modified carburetor on the RVs.
Yes.
I don't believe that's something that would be used on a Comanche. The reason that modified carburetor, the only difference was the main jets were reamed out to a larger size because they are trying to get more, they are getting more horsepower out of those engines because of changes that they can make in an experimental aircraft. If you put those jets in our carburetors on our airplanes, it would run so rich that it would just flood it right out. They wouldn't work. It's not something we would use. It's something the RV guys are doing.
Greg is correct. However, it turns out there is a secret cool alternate carburetor, and I don't have that research done yet, but it is actually something that was approved in some. One thing that we may try to do is that there were, and this is compliments Billy Brooks, there were veins in some of the early, I want to say it was in the carburetors, but I'm not sure. And in some cases, they broke for a particular reason that does not appear to have been related to a real problem. And they were all ordered to be removed. But that alternate arrangement appears to have potentially been a good arrangement. So first, there is some modification to the carburetor. I have the information, but not here, so I'm not going to speak about it because I'd probably be wrong. But we will be bringing this up in a future Zoom and certainly in a future article, like a Nor'easter, will probably post it on Delphi and Facebook as well. Once we've got the data together and we've confirmed it's good data, we'll be bringing that forward. And you may actually see an STC product or possibly an owner-produced part, depending on what's legal.
CJ, I can find out all about that tomorrow. I'll stop at Zephyr Engines and talk to LJ. He knows all this stuff well, and I'll just pick his brain and I'll get the info.
Great. Greg, text me and I will dump all of the notes and all of the parts numbers to you. We've got it mostly written, but just it's not verified, so we couldn't bring it out because I'm certainly not competent.
Okay, let's talk tomorrow and I'll take
all right. Yeah. I'll put it on you to contact me and say, give me that stuff and I'll dump it right over to you.
Okay,
all right. All right. Here you go, everybody. This is how progress gets made in the Comanche world. Pete, go ahead and move us forward. Yep. Unless any other questions or comments? Okay. So make a list of AD maintenance cycles, such as bungees, and why you're doing those. So one of the key things is that we have some ADs on our airframes, and you can go and look them up on the FAA website. It's actually really easy. You go in and you put in your model number, etc. But having a list of these AD maintenance cycles and why you're doing them is essential because of a couple of things. One is it'll save your mechanic tons of time, and that means it's going to save you tons of money. Second, you won't miss ADs. And with very few exceptions, the ADs are there for good reason. And it is possible and has happened often enough that an AD gets signed off improperly. That affects your logbook, that affects the value of your airplane. In addition, if it's signed off improperly, and if your airplane gets sold or you happen to have, for some reason, a need to change ANPs, the subsequent ANP may miss the fact that something wasn't performed properly. So for example, the 1,000-hour gear AD actually has two parts. One part says, every 3 years, change your bungees. Now, one of the top 10 tips was change your bungees much more frequently because of what Hans just said, which is that a new bungee takes 250 pounds plus or minus of force off your gear motor when your gear is coming up. And then a 1-year-old bungee, Hans was already down to like 180 pounds. And by year 3, your bungee is basically useless. So, but nonetheless, the AD says do it every 3 years. The 1,000-hour gear AD, on the other hand, is obviously something that gets done every 1,000 hours, or I just actually had the experience of a 1,000-hour gear AD having been signed off incorrectly in 1978, resulting in a very long time between 1,000-hour gear ADs. Fortunately, not a gear collapse, but you don't want that to happen. Anybody else want to comment on this?
Well, going from, I have the data on the video, but just going from memory, in the down and lock position, the bungee is stretched to 23 3/8. At that position, it's 250 pounds for a new one. For a 1-year-old one, I'm just trying to remember, something like 195 or 200, something like that. The 2-year-old one was 160 pounds. I didn't have a 3-year-old bungee to measure, but my guess is 100 pounds. So if you go for the full 3 years, the bungee is doing very little for you. And I did a measurement a number of years ago with a small jack, a load cell, and one fellow was underneath. We took measurements of gear angle, and I was in the cabin and pumping the hydraulic jack. I think 3 strokes. We take a load measurement and angular measurement of the gear, and we did that all the way to the up cycle. And we did it with and without the bungees, and the difference is 250 pounds. And just to put this in perspective, a full up gear overhaul by Matt, making new windings up for the motor, either making you another transmission or refurbishing a Dukes, you're looking at $3,500. So take good care of your gear and transmission is the bottom message there. And replace bungees every year. They're only like, I don't know, $17, $18 a piece. It's money well spent.
What about air loads?
About what?
What about air loads? Wouldn't air loads make a difference to those weights? Those forces? The air load of slipstream on the nose wheel, wouldn't that change the requirement?
That's a good point, Jim. Would the air loads make a big change in the requirement for the bungees, Hans? In other words, the when in flight, the air is taking some of the pressure off the gear.
Actually, I think that's true. But to measure it and to make a measurement in the air is kind of difficult. But the 2 doors are angled so that the air loads, the air loads help the gear up, certainly in the up cycle. It helps the nose gear come up and the gear doors I'll probably push a little bit on the gear. I don't know how much air load you get from the main gear doors. That's questionable. One of my projects I want to do is I have a clamp-on DC ammeter, and I do know how much current the motor draws as the gear is going up on jacks. And the maximum amperage you don't want to go over 20 amps. At least that's what my airplane is. What I'd like to do one of these days is put the ammeter in flight and measure at different airspeeds, and that data no one has yet. So we can talk about it, but nobody has the data. I've learned I used to cycle my gear at 140 indicated, and I'm learning that at that speed I get a lot of pitch up, on the downwind leg. And when I tried it at like 125 to 130, the pitch up was a lot less. So what that's telling me is when you're in the pattern and going a little slower, it takes some of the load off the gear. So, but your message of aerodynamic assistance, either going up or going down, nobody has that data. I'll see if I can find some time to do that.
Jim, good question. Good point. The interesting thing is usually when we're pulling our gear up, we're going pretty slowly. So there's not, might be a little bit less aerodynamic assistance than when we put it down would be my only comment. But there would still be some, clearly.
It'd be interesting to have several data points on gear down and gear up in flight for the current.
You're saying you've got them, Jim?
No, it would be interesting to get several data points on gear down and gear up in flight to see what is actually going on.
I sense a future ComancheZOOM on a presentation on another scientific research project by DER Hans Newbert. Good deal. Hans, this is stacked up behind your next two projects. And Lord only knows what else you're working on.
Well,
all right, any other, go ahead.
It's data that nobody's ever collected, so I suspect that there's a sweet spot in terms of indicated airspeed for the up cycle and the down cycle.
Yeah.
And the message there would be preserve the motor and transmission to as much as you can, because they're very expensive and difficult to get anymore.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. This Zoom has just paid for itself well over on that one point. Jim, thanks for bringing it up. And Hans, thanks for volunteering. Let us know when you need us to take a collection.
Hey, CJ, I've got a comment on this panel 7.
Yes.
Not only should be at bungees, but also maintenance cycles should include things like ELTs, which are federal, but there's also things that you can add for state. Like here in Virginia, we have to have a state sticker every year. And it's one of these things, we just like to go fly, but if somebody had a list of all of the maintenance items to put on, bungees just being one, that would certainly be helpful for me, a new owner, on all the little things that I have to keep track of and when they're due, rather than look through 75 pages of logbooks. Having a single sheet of when something's due would certainly be a big help. So if somebody has that list of what to check, I'd really like it.
CJ, this is Pat.
By all means.
Can I show a screenshot for a minute, please?
Pete, go ahead. All right. Pete, just let Pat know when you've enabled.
Okay, this is what I put together for my airplane in particular. It lists the ADs that are applying down the side, plus what date and time of compliance, the method of compliance, if it's recurring or not, when it's due next. So that I keep in the front of my logbooks so that you can all take a quick glance and know what's applicable. Things that have already been complied with are referenced elsewhere, but this is the recurring stuff. Underneath, I have an equipment list. In this case, engine, manufacturer, part number, serial number, date installed, tack time, time since installed, including here like ELT battery, when it's due next. So things like this really help you keep track of what equipment you've got, so you don't have to go looking through your logbooks trying to figure out whether some AD or maintenance issue applies to you or does not.
This is fantastic.
I like one of those.
Yeah, this is an Excel spreadsheet.
Looks really good.
Pat, is this something you'd be willing to contribute to the community?
Sure.
Brilliant. You're gonna...
But everybody's got to go through for their own airplane and put their own information in there. I mean, if you're at all familiar with whether it's Excel or something else, all you have to do is do it. It's a data gathering experience.
It's not quick, and Pat's absolutely correct. Every airplane needs its own list because they're specific to the airplane. But there are a couple of people who have created brilliant spreadsheets like Pat that are so helpful. And the other option would be to use something called ad log, and they provide this customized list for your airplane that you can then go through your logbooks, and you'll end up with a really good summary of what you need to do for your particular airplane to comply, and what and where you are in that cycle. And it takes a little while to get the ad log together, but it saves your mechanic so much time. And I think it's adlog.com. Just did it, by the way. So if you'd be interested in having a ComancheZOOM on how to do an ad log, just write into the chat window and we'll make it happen. I think that Robert Klein's suggestion to get state-specific things is something that I had never heard before. Has anybody done that? Because I think it's brilliant. I never even thought of it.
We have the same problem in Connecticut. We have to have a sticker on the plane, and it's a local one. The local town is the one that issues the sticker.
Wow.
Don't tell California.
Yep. Brilliant. Okay, Pete, moving on. Unless there are any final comments on the list. So this one we touched on briefly. This is actually a Pete Morse top 10 tips. This is something he wished he'd known. Writing the proper tire pressure. This came out of the original person suggesting a top 10 tips for new Comanche owners, saying, I can't find where the tire pressures are. And they are in the maintenance section. They're not necessarily where you'd think they are. But if you go look in your maintenance section, that's where you'd find your tire pressures. And Pete suggested, just because it's very convenient, to write the proper tire pressures on the inside of the gear door covers, not the outside where they would see see it when your gear is retracted. Any comments on that before we move on?
We had a tow plane today that had a soft tire, so we went over and put some air and stuff like that. He had the hubcaps on his Husky, and on the hubcap he wrote 20 pounds.
somebody who's not super finicky about his paint, huh?
20 pounds doesn't sound right.
20 pounds sounds too soft, Hans, or too much?
No, 20. I sort of committed to memory. It's either, I believe it's 42 psi in all the tires.
For Comanche, it's 42 on the mains and 27 on the nose. But for his Husky, that's what he runs. He runs also. He lands on turf all the time.
Oh, that's interesting. So if you're operating in and out of a turf strip, because if we think about 9 or 3, 2, 1 pop, can anybody comment as to whether you want your tires ever so slightly softer if you're operating out of turf? I would have thought you'd want them fuller.
Turf gets wet and muddy.
Yeah, the lower pressure would sink in less.
Interesting.
It would also help absorb a little bit of the shock because your field won't be as smooth as a tarmac. So you'll get a little bit of cushioning from there.
Think of those guys with the off-wheel road people. They go to the beach, they take the air out of the tire, and then when they go done with the beach, they go back on the road, they put the air back in the tire. The hard tire runs more efficiently, less gas they use it, but the soft tire doesn't sink in.
Well, we are specifically not recommending anybody deviate from their recommendations in their POH and et cetera, but you heard it here first. I'm going to remember this.
That also applies to takeoff, run, and time on the runway.
Say more, Pat?
The more air you have in the tire, the shorter you're going to have for a takeoff roll because your rolling friction is less. If you have a low tire, it's going to be longer.
I can always tell when my tires are soft because it's hard to push the thing back into the tie down.
Oh, good one.
And there must be a difference between the singles and the twins, because I'm looking at page 2.2-6 in my service manual, and it says tire pressure is 42 psi for all of them. So maybe the singles with the big tire, there must be a difference there. I would say look in the service manual just to be sure. But for me, it's 42 on all of them.
What about tire creep? Sorry.
I know that there is a difference in tire pressures on the 180s, the 250s, 260s, and the twins. So you really do need to know what your tire pressures are supposed to be.
Yeah.
What about tire creep marks?
Ask again, Jim.
Tire creep marks.
Oh,
Marks,
yes. So your
marks on the
tires are
tire.
unairworthy. Are you talking about if you can see the white?
No,
For the
how you check for tire creep. There's a mark on the tire, mark on the rim, and they're supposed to coincide. Otherwise, you're getting tire creep.
Oh. Jim, good one. I didn't even know about that. Does anybody else know about tire creep marks?
That would show up especially if your tires are somewhat soft and you're using brakes. It wouldn't happen on the nose very much, but it would definitely happen on the mains.
It probably should be part of the daily inspection, is to look for tire creep.
Good. Pete, would you be willing to shoot a quick little video on how to, with using the Zoom capability on checking for tire creep, or does anybody else want to do that and we'll post it? Because Jim's right, it should be part of the daily check and I didn't even know about it. So I'm guessing other people didn't either. All right, Jim, we're going to come back to you.
There's generally a mark on a tire which indicates where the valve should be.
Yep.
And that's probably the way to check it, or you could put a mark just to make sure.
Yep. Good. We will take that up. And Jim, thanks for that tip. Am I the only one that had no idea? Alrighty, so, yep. So I am not going to repeat the tank discussion because it was long, but I am going to take a moment to say that the reason that this tip is here, and probably it should be near the top, is for those who are new to the Comanche, it is very common for people who are filling our tanks, who are linesmen, to fill to the bottom of the filler neck. And at that point, on most of our tanks, most of our main tanks, you're leaving 5 gallons of fuel on the ground. If you're filled to the bottom of the filler neck in general, you've filled 25 of your 30 gallons capability. And it is really one of the most, this is the biggest killer of both Comanches and pilots, is fuel starvation and fuel mismanagement. So the big things for filling your tanks all the way are, first, fill them all the way up to the top of the rings in the neck. In fact, you can go ahead and fill it so that it slightly overflows. And when you go ahead and put that big rubber stop in, surprisingly enough, because everybody's like, no, it's going to spill. I mean, I've had people say this to me probably 40 times. And you put that big rubber tank filler, having a complete senior moment, and it does not spill a drop. It just sets right in there, you lock it down, and you have full tanks. The second thing is, when you really want to get every little bit of fuel capability out of your tanks, there is, in your baggage door, all Comanches have 2 screws. When the Comanche is level, those 2 screws will be level. So if you really, really are planning, we hope you're not going to plan a cross-country trip where this is that critical, but if you do, you can get a level, lay it across those 2 screws in the baggage door, make sure your airplane is level, and then fill your tanks all the way to the top. That's the way to get max fuel in there. And third, some people who are really just trying to get everything, because with the dihedral of the wing, the tank filler neck is somewhat towards the fuselage, and therefore there's a part of the tank that's outboard that has a little bit of a gap in it. If you can picture this, the wings go up just a little bit from the fuselage of the airplane. The filler neck is towards the airplane a little bit, so the tanks, which are filling the insides of the wings, actually go up a little bit from the filler neck. Some people get a little piece of tubing with a stiff wire in them, and they literally will put that piece of tubing with the stiff wire, and it's bent in kind of a U shape. They'll put it down through the filler neck to evacuate, to allow the air that's trapped up outboard of the filler neck, to allow that air to evacuate through the filler neck as they add that just last little bit of fuel, and that will get you another couple of tenths of a gallon. Any questions? Comments? Okay, good deal. Well, Ben just asked, how about fuel drain? So before we move on, that's actually really critical. Your fuel vents can cause you to lose engine power if they get stuffed up. And actually, there was somebody who was mentioning that it's possible in certain types of weather conditions to get your fuel vents iced up. Ben's comment, let me just read it because I know his mic isn't working, is this is the only aircraft he's seen with drains in the center. And oh yes, it's not easy to drain to check for water contamination, etc. Yep. There are some people who have done very creative things so that you can drain your fuel into a pan, and then if it's clean and has no contaminants or water in it, just pour it back into the wings. But except for 1 or 2 aircraft, including Robert Klein's that I've seen modified to handle a quick drain, yes, so do sump your tanks. I got really spanked at a VFR a couple of years ago because water in your fuel will cause, especially if you fly your airplane and you end up with water in your tanks, and it gets into your gascolator bowl or whatever, they'll rust out and you'll end up with nasty surprises. But so there's a maintenance problem with that as well. But yes, sump your tanks. And to do that, if I recall, the time that you need to spend with your little finger pulling up on that latch under the floor to let the fuel flow down through that little tube that's spilling fuel, hopefully not all over the ramp, but into your bottle or pan or whatever you're using. It is surprisingly long. I have been told 30 seconds to truly properly sump a tank. Can anybody with expertise comment on that? So the big thing is, unlike most aircraft, to properly sump a Comanche takes time. You actually have to sit there and let the water come out for, if I've been taught correctly, 30 seconds per tank. Yes. Yep. So 4 times. Yep, exactly. So that would be 2 minutes for mains and 3 for 6 tank aircraft. If there are no more comments, the other ways, by the way, to accidentally leave fuel on the ground is if your tanks have a clip that's let go, they'll partially collapse and you won't have as much fuel in there as you expect. If you have wrinkles on the bottom, you both lose a little bit of capacity and that will trap water down there. So making a custom tank stick is really worthwhile, where you completely empty the tank and then you pour it back in 2 gallons or 5 gallons at a time until you find out what your particular tank's capacity is. Otherwise, know that your 30-gallon tanks are generally 30 gallons max. You have 2 gallons unusable, so flight plan at 28. There are a few tanks, because all Comanches are individual, that are slightly over 30. There are a few that are slightly less than 30. When you flight plan, just plan accordingly. And if you're not positive that you have one of the definite 30-gallon tanks, assume you have 27.5 gallons per main. It's really, really critical. This is the biggest killer of pilots and airplanes. So use your oxes, fill your tanks. Any other questions or comments?
DJ Ray Fay here. When you pour the fuel back into your tank, it's a good idea, at least I have done it in the past, is to run it through a coffee filter.
Oh, good one, Ray.
Because coffee filters are pretty much available all over, and there's nothing that I know of that comes off of the paper filter. So that should be a plus.
Yeah, CJ, I have a question. On my 180, I have a single sump. If I'm sumping, say, the right tank, and I switch to the left tank, how much fuel must I sump before I'm actually getting fuel from the other tank?
That is a great question, and that is why I've been told to sump for 30 seconds. Now, I'd love to get a real expert who's like, you really need to do 30 seconds to actually sump that tank. But I've been told, and I'm flying a 180 as well, so I've got one little thing going down through the belly to just sump and then switch tanks and then sump again.
Well, 30 seconds seems excessive.
It really does.
In terms of switching from one tank to another when you're sumping, it's going to be the same as when you're in the air and you switch tanks. It's not instantaneous, but darn close to it, because the fuel is right there at that valve. But the short distance between the valve and the exit into your catching basin, that's the difference. It is really a short period of time, but what you're doing with the 30 seconds is checking the whole line, everything is all the way back to the tank, to see if there's any water hiding somewhere.
CJ, let me comment. This is Greg. Just installing new bladders and with my plane still disassembled, the main tanks the fuel pickup from the main tank to the valve is probably about, I don't know, maybe between a 4 and 5 foot run at the most. And that's a 3/8 line. So the volume in a 3/8 line for 4 to 5 feet is not much, you know, maybe maybe a pint. But that's a lot of fuel. Now, 30 seconds, you can probably collect nearly 3/4 of a gallon in 30 seconds. But the problem can be in if you have tip tanks. Now you've got 20 feet of line or more from the tip tank. So you're going to be, if you've got any water in your tip tank, it's not going to show up for 20 feet of 3/8 line. So that's pretty substantial. And I would think that you'd want to sump the tip tanks longer because of that run. You know, there might be half a gallon, I'm guessing, in that line, in that 20-foot line.
That's really, really good point. I guess our action item now is to figure out how long it takes to sump mains, auxes, and tips and get back to the group.
You know, I'll know that fairly soon because my tanks are empty. And in fact, I'm putting the tip tanks on this weekend. And when I do fill them up, I put size senders in all 4 tanks. And when I fill them up, I'll know how long it takes when I turn the valve on to purge the lines out, how long it's going to take for it to fill up and come through the gascolator.
Very cool. All right, Greg, you've got your action item. Thank you.
Okay.
It's almost not a problem anyhow, because if you're collecting the fuel and planning to pour it back in, if it's still good, you don't lose a thing. All you're losing is a little time.
Well, I think the key thing here is the amount of time it's going to take to find out for real if you've got water in your tanks. That's the reason that we're going over the need to sump for a long time, because generally we're doing that to find out if we have water or contaminants that have entered since our last time flying.
I've heard just recently of some creative ways of checking that. It is hard to get underneath there and collect the fuel coming out of the gascolator, but I've heard of some suggestions such as a glass bottle or a clear plastic bottle on a creeper with a funnel where you can slide it underneath there with a bar or a rod, slide it underneath there, pull it out. Yeah, it's a messy thing to do because number one, it's low. It's hard to get underneath there. Or maybe it's harder to get up out of there, put it that way. And, if you got a glass bottle, you can see the condition of the fuel very easily. It's your big Gats jar, and then you can pour it back in. But it's a messy job.
Yeah, yep, for sure.
Hi, this is Barry. I've got a question if I can jump in here.
Please do.
I've got, my 180 does not have the Knack fuel vent, so I have to pull the cover off my fuel tank and reach in and check those retainers that hold the bladder up. And I'm wondering if anybody knows where I could find those, because I'm getting ready to change my bladders and I would like to install them so that I don't have that service bulletin that I have to comply with. Thanks.
Good one. Where do we find the Knack of fuel vents?
There's been a big discussion on the Delphi forum about them recently, but I think if you call and talk to Floats and Fuel Cells or the other bladder supplier, that's a start anyway.
Yeah, I called Webco before and they don't have them.
Try the bladder manufacturers. They may or may not know about it. I mean, they make them for everybody, but they do know Comanches. I know I got 2 bladders from Floats and Fuel Cells recently. Great people to work with.
Where are they located? Do you think if I put that in Google, I'll find them?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and there are 3 or 4 companies that make bladders for Comanche owners. And so, and I know this only because I went around at Oshkosh talking to people saying, hey, this isn't very sexy, but we might want to do a group live for Comanche bladders. And they were all willing to work with us. So we haven't finished doing those yet, but if there's enough people needing of needing bladders, go ahead and start posting or contacting us, and we'll get one put together.
Now you bring it up. Thank you.
I know. Sorry, Greg.
Yeah. Put me on the list because I haven't bought them yet, and mine are about 53 years old.
You know, one of the things I love about our airplanes is so many of them have original bladders, and they're all working great. So
yeah, I'm a 59. 59 of mine are original.
Yeah, are you able to type your contact information into the chat along with what you need?
Sure.
Okay, great. Do it, and we'll get on it.
All right, thanks.
Sure thing.
I pulled my bladders out.
Greg, you can put the name of that company in the chat window too.
I'll see
Floats and fuel cells.
I can do that. I pulled my 1959 bladders out. They looked fine, and I don't know if they were leaking or not. When I took them out, they weren't. But hey, I was replacing everything else on the plane, so I did it. And they told me don't expect to get the life that you got out of the originals. I said if it lasts me my lifetime, that'll be okay.
I have heard the same thing, that the new fuel cells generally will go 20 to 30 years, but not necessarily 50 to 60. It's a different rubber. Any comments before we move on?
Yeah, I've got a suggestion on the drain. If you go to Walmart, you can buy, they call it an under bed wardrobe storage bin. They're about 8 inches deep, but they're 6 feet long and about 3 feet wide. They're clear plastic. I've been using it for 20 years with my twin Comanche. I slide it under. I don't have to be exactly right because it's so damn long. And I drain into it. It's clear plastic. There's water, I see it. And if there's no water, I drain it back into the tanks. They cost 15 to 20 bucks at Walmart. It's called an underbed wardrobe storage bin. So yeah, it's absolutely perfect for it.
Good idea, Mark.
They're
well
made
done.
by Sterlite or somebody. You know, the standard clear bins. They're weird because they've got a blue cover on them that is hinged. It's made for putting dresses and stuff under a bed, but it turns out to be just perfect for the Comanche. It's long enough that if you're in the ballpark, you'll catch the fuel.
What would be nice if you put a valve on it so you can drain it on the bottom.
Yeah, probably could drill through and just put a little, be real easy to do. But I find it so easy to tip it up. I just slam a funnel into the tip tank or something and, pour it into the tank that's lowest.
And it's not too big to lift up.
No. I mean, it is about 6 feet long, but it weighs nothing.
Yeah, okay. Oh, good idea.
Like I said, 15 bucks.
Love it. That is great.
I also use 2 of those in lieu of drip pans because drip pans get nasty, whereas these are plastic. They're really easy to clean with simple green. And they're long, so you stick them under the engine nacelle. It's the length of the nacelle. It catches drips and just, spray it out with simple green.
Oh, nice. And also for those of us doing oil changes, helpful.
Oh yeah, I use it for that as well. I use it for that, and I use it for washing. Just go into a Walmart or a Target, go to their storage area, and you'll spot them right away. They're about 5 to 6 feet long, about 3 feet wide, with a blue lid on the top of them, clear plastic, and they work like a champ.
Love it. Cool. Any other comments?
Yeah. Because I tried the funnel routine, and I was always missing. And after, eating holes in the asphalt in the bottom of my hangar, I said, enough of this. And with that wardrobe thing, you never miss any, so you don't have to worry about, spillage or anything else.
Very cool. Hey, Craig Hammond made just a quick comment that I wanted to bring out. Craig commented that the regular coffee filter, so Gray had this great idea, which is to, use a coffee filter to pour your fuel back in because it'll catch contaminants and they're readily available. But Craig Hammond said, there are actually filters available that will catch water because coffee filters, obviously, the whole point is to let the water pass through. So it'll catch contaminants, but if you're, so Craig, do you have any further comment on that? Because it's kind of a great point. but you'll have to unmute.
Go to the auto supply and see if you go to the auto supply and see if you can find something on a filter. Usually they're built into a funnel.
Gotcha. Oh, built into a funnel would make it even easier. Good.
Yeah, I
And
used
Craig, you're
one
back
today
on
on,
headset.
I used one yesterday on my farm tractor, and I captured. I was using it before I put fuel in the tractor.
Yeah, Tractor Supply and Menards both carry tractor fuel filters, and they've got this metal screen in it. It looks like the ones I use on leaf filter, but it catches water. So that's a simple way of doing it. You just get a tractor fuel filter.
Now,
Or
are we
fuel funnel,
sure
I should
enough?
say.
Okay, cool. A water trapping funnel. Are we sure enough that that's going to keep all of the water out of our tanks to use them? Forgive me for asking, but
I don't know, but it sure works on tractors. I mean, that's when I've had fuel that I knew was suspect, it seemed to catch an awful lot of water.
The mesh is coated. It's like the screen on a gas filter you buy from Aircraft Spruce.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I know Tractor
Great.
Supply Company has them.
probably a lot cheaper than spruce. Okay, super helpful. So we can get water trapping filters that are built right into funnels at either Tractor Supply or Spruce.
Yeah, it's a screen, and if you go to a farm supply store and just ask for tractor funnels.
Brilliant. All right.
CJ,
Our top 10 tips is up to 50.
Yeah, CJ, did you want to continue with the rest of the tips like here, or do you want to go to the group buy stuff?
The group buys. Tell you what, Pete, why don't you skim through them and we will spend 1 minute commenting on each.
Okay. They're not sequential, really. Yeah, there's a couple of jumps.
Okay, sounds good. So just as you go into the flare, try adding nose up trim. Our original requester said, if you try to land it like a Cherokee, because he was coming into the Comanches from the Cherokees, he said Cherokees are higher up than Comanches, and if you try to land them that way, that won't work so well. And then he said, and in addition to that, as you go into the flare, try adding nose up trim. So the Comanches, especially the 540, and the 400s with their 720s, tend to be a little nose heavy, and it tends to put a lot of pressure on your arms as you start to go into the flare and you're trying to hold it off. Adding nose up trim lightens the airplane in your hands and lets you stay relaxed and tends to give you a better landing. Any quick comments? Okay. By the way, the other one is when those numbers get big in your windscreen, look down the runway at the end of the runway, and it'll just naturally tend to make you land a little lighter. It blew me away how well that worked. We already discussed this briefly, but time your fuel use. So Comanche gauges are only required to read properly when at 0. I'm going to say that again. The only time your gauges are legally required to be accurate is at 0. This means it is perfectly legal to fly around with a gauge that reads at 3/4 when your tank is full, or that reads full when your tank is at 1/2. So don't trust your gauges. If you've gotten and time your tanks, make sure you rotate through all of your tanks. So take off, switch to your oxes or tips. I literally have read NTSP reports on 2 major crashes that in some cases killed pilots and in other cases killed Comanches from people that did not switch to their oxes. They ran out of fuel on approach with empty mains and full oxes. I have 2 accidents in mind right now that are not very old. Please, please time your tanks, switch to your oxes and tips, use them up, land on your fullest main. Any questions on that one? Because that's a big one.
I have a tip.
Go ahead.
I've used for years. At the top of my flight plan, each turn and distance and so forth and heading, I write the following: 30, 60, 60, and 30.
Yep.
And that's
good, and thanks. Yep.
The time I expect to use on each tank. And as I use the say 30 minutes, I'll put 30 minutes underneath the first 30 and draw a line. That's done.
Good. Thank you very much, Hank. That's a helpful tip. This is true, by the way, even if you have a fuel totalizer. And I won't explain why now, but I literally just got a call from a pilot. Somebody screwed up fueling his airplane. He didn't know what he had. So anyway, so even if you have a totalizer, time your tanks. Okay. This is critical. Don't overturn the nose gear when towing. So if the Comanche has a relatively short range that the nose gear can turn, it is really easy for something as strong as a tow vehicle to overturn your nose gear. And when you break that stop off, you think, oh, I broke my stop off. No, what happened is that pressure goes all the way back to your rudder, and it can literally damage your rudder. If you overturn your nose gear and you look down and that stop is damaged because the FBO took your airplane and overturned your nose gear, you actually need to go and make sure your rudder's okay. And that's a call to your A&P, don't assume. There is a trick, which is you can disconnect it and you can take the cotter pin off, and people put a little easy to remove locking cotter pin on, and then they remove it and they stick it on their yoke so they don't forget to reconnect their nose gear, because that's another bad day. But if you know they're gonna be towing with the mechanical thing with a tug, you may want to disconnect the top and bottom things so that your stops aren't going to get impacted, and that will protect your rudder because it'll allow the bottom part of your nose gear to free swivel. Any questions or comments? Okay. If you lose your engine, the difference in your glide ratio between your prop control all the way pushed towards the panel and pulled towards you is as much as going from 9.5 to 1 to 13 to 1. It's a little bit individual to the aircraft and the way it's loaded, but the big thing is if you lose your engine, pull your prop control all the way back so that you can extend your glide rate, your glide. Any comments?
On the other side, if you're a little bit high when you're working to your field, you can push it the other way and increase your rate of descent without speeding up.
Yep. And normally you're going to be pushing everything forward to land anyways, but Hank is correct. It does act a little bit like a brake. However, do not use it like a brake because it is very rude. It's like dropping your car into second gear to really just to do that suddenly. So be a little careful. Any last comments before we move on?
Yeah, CJ, I do.
Please.
That will only work if the prop's turning, because you'll have oil pressure then. Most likely it'll be turning, but if the engine freezes up, if it locks up, it won't matter then. But it really won't matter because the prop won't be spinning. You won't have much of a windmill
of drag.
You won't have.
Yep, Greg's right. If you've really frozen up, then it's just hanging out there. Then you're actually at your best glide ratio then.
Yeah, that's true.
Good deal. For better hot starting, many people especially with fuel injected, hate hot starting their engines, especially between 30 and 45 minutes. If you're having that problem, you're not alone. You can do two things. You can pop your oil filler door because given where things are, we tend to get some vapor lock if you land and then have to do a hot start too soon. The second thing you can do is install electronic ignition, either electro air or a Surefly mag replacement, and your hot starting problems typically go away. And we have a nice couple of group buy specials to announce coming up soon. Comanches are notoriously, well, they have a reputation as being hard to land. If you can control your final approach speed to plus or minus 5 knots, airspeed control on final is the best thing you can do to make your airplane land better. That plus installing wing fillets or gaps that on your trailing edges. But yeah, just airspeed control. The Comanche is super sensitive to that, and it lands really, really well if you do airspeed control on final. Most people come over the fence at 80 to 85 miles an hour. It's a little bit dependent on load, but in aircraft, and then whatever mods have been put on it. Any comments on that? This is a whole topic all by itself. Finally, this one is here because gear ups due to failure to extend the gear for some reason are slightly more common in Comanches. We have fewer landing gear problems than most other airplanes because we have this very, very reliable and strong electromechanical gear. And if it's maintained properly, which goes back to Hans's stuff and what Matt Kirk's always telling us about, it's like bulletproof. But we have this bad habit of not putting our gear down. So when you are a new Comanche owner and you get into the Comanche, really be super conscious. Like I got into, I know of a number of people, not just me, but I noticed one day I was going gumps and I would get gas, undercarriage, mixer, props, seatbelts, and safety, but I wasn't really checking. I am one of the people who hasn't done this yet, but specifically when you go gas, look at where your tank is. Am I on a main? When you do undercarriage, look at your lights and make sure they are green, down and locked. When you do, and so on and so forth, it will say you always want to be in the I haven't done this yet category. And there are many, many of us who are in the I did it. But if you don't do that GUMPS check super consciously and do it 3 times, do it on downwind, do it on base, do it on final, do it on short final. It sounds stupid, but do it consciously and be aware that you have checked each thing on that list with your eyes.
I agree, CJ. I'm guilty of it too.
There it is. All right. Good deal. Shoulder harnesses. Okay, when you get your airplane, if you do not already have them, before you do anything
CJ,
else.
can you back up just a second on that?
Yes, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, if you are coming in and your green light is not on, or it's barely on, or you're not sure, cycle your navigation light, because if it's off, you want to be, if it's on, you want to be sure that it's on. And it's because the electrical system gets in, and this will also prevent a gear up landing, because the down switch is keyed into your electrical system on the nav lights.
Oh, good tip. Yep. So people have mistakenly done emergency gear extensions because they couldn't see that their down light was on. But Robert's point is, if for some reason your electrical system isn't working, good tip.
Okay, Tom McGowan, there's a related tip. You can replace the bulb in your green downlight with an LED, and that will be bright whether your nav lights are on or not.
Mm-hmm. And the nice thing is, it's only going to blind you at night when you are landing, which is not all the time when you're flying. So good tip, Robin. Thank you.
And another important thing is that we can visually see the Johnson bar, that it is in the fully engaged position. That's a benefit of our aircraft.
Yep. Except for the C's and the twins.
True. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Oh. All right. So the thing about shoulder harnesses, I'm just going to be quick here, but the reason that, and this has become a group consensus, we do group buy specials. One of the group buy specials we're announcing tonight is shoulder harnesses. It's generally $100 to $200 off per kit for Comanches. And we'll be posting this. I'm going to have to breeze through because we are a little bit long, and we may need to do another one where we really introduce all the group buys because a lot of people have stepped up to support our fleets. Comanches came out of the factory without shoulder harnesses. The C's have a bracket already. Most C's already have a bracket up there, but Comanches crashes that, well, in 1995, we actually had a Northeast tribe chief that got killed in a survivable accident when he had an off-airport landing and they hit a berm. Both front seat passengers were killed. Both rear seat passengers survived. The comment from the NTSB was this was a survivable accident. If they had not hit their panels, they would have survived. Shoulder harnesses give you greater stability in rough air, as long as you can tighten them down, and they're easy to tighten them down, whether you have the mechanical ones or whether you have the ones with the rollers. But mostly they will save either your face or your life in a sudden unplanned stop. The install's a little bit more extensive for Alpha Aviations than it is for Phil Airs. Alpha Aviations have a slightly higher test rating, but they're both legal. And those are the two STC shoulder harnesses for Comanches. But it is the one simple thing you can do to make your airplane safe. And furthermore, your resale value will be better because most people who are looking for Comanches want that to already be done. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I'd like to comment.
Please, go ahead, Hans.
I did some work on composite airline seats a while back, and they were trying to install shoulder harnesses with the seats. And this is with a dynamic sled, what's called a dynamic sled test. And all airlines have to have TSO 127B seating, which is 16 Gs. One thing that was very consistent with the testing, with sled testing, was the shoulder harness load at 16 Gs is 1,000 pounds.
Oh.
And that's a 95 percentile male in a seat. There is no way in a survivable crash your body can sustain and or hold back 1,000 pounds. What will happen is, if you do not have a shoulder harness, your body will rotate around your waist where the seatbelt is, and you will hit your head on the glare shield. And that is fatal because it's a sharp edge. So this is not just trivial. As a matter of fact, I won't fly with anybody unless they have a shoulder harness. So this is serious. I have the fixed bolt. I think it's the Alpha one. It was put on ages ago. That's the shoulder harness I use. Then there's the inertia reels that Casola used to have, and now I'm not sure if Phil Air has that or not. Anyway, whatever you do, put shoulder harnesses in. 1,000 pounds, you will move and you will hit your head. So that's just fundamental. Thank you.
Can I add, in the race car world, they've been losing their life because they had the shoulder harnesses, and they use a Hans device around their neck now to prevent the head going forward, because the sudden stop will kill you too. So they both have problems.
Yep. Lou, is that something you could look into to see whether that's something that could be made available in an airplane?
You'd need a helmet, and if you're flying something with a helmet, it's perfect, because it attaches to your helmet, to your shoulder harnesses.
Got it.
And so without a helmet on, it's useless.
Yep.
Yeah, I have firsthand use of that. I've been racing for 30 years, and we're required to wear Hans devices. Hey, that's how Dale Earnhardt was killed. That's the evolution of the Hans device because of his death. And yeah, they are very, very effective. And when you're strapped into a race car, you are strapped in as absolutely tight as you can. And actually, when I first started wearing the Hans device, it was very cumbersome. You had limited head movement. You couldn't look much to the sides at all, but you got used to it and you appreciated the safety of it. But it's not really practical in an airplane by any means, unfortunately.
helpful. The two shoulder harnesses available again are Alpha Aviation and Phil Air. Both of them now have the inertial reels available, although both of them, strangely enough or interestingly enough, recommend the manual and said if you really, really need to move, just disconnect the shoulder harness and reconnect it in flight. And many people take off with them tight, loosen them during flight, and then tighten them up for landing. Either or. Usually the inertial reels are a little bit more expensive, on the order of a couple $100, but when you think about your life and your family's life, it's just not that much of a thing. So usually your price for the kit is anywhere between $750 and about $1,200. The discounts are giving us about $120 to $180 off, so usually about 10%. And then the installs for the slightly higher test Alpha Aviation are a little bit more involved, and in particular, the earlier models did not have the same stringers and stiffeners in the fuselage as the later models. The fuselage is the same in terms of its dimensions, but there's a little bit more making it stronger in the later model Comanches. And as a result, to get the same strength, there's some additional stiffening and reinforcing that goes on with the Alphas. The Phil Air is a slightly simpler and quicker install. Just get one of them in. Sorry to dwell on that, but can't emphasize it enough. Any comments or questions before we move on?
CJ, I have a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Hi, it's Dan Cannon. I fly a 260. I just had a quick question about AmSafe. If you heard of the AmSafe seatbelts, I'm wondering if anyone has any information about whether they are.
Yes. So AmSafe is available for the Comanche. Alpha Aviation sells the STC to install the AmSafe. They took it off their site, and she can explain why, but now they just check and make sure your model will accept it. But yeah, AmSafe is available for the Comanche. Alpha Aviation has the STC for it. So what they do is, I'm trying to remember if you call Alpha and get the STC or if you call AmSafe, but believe it or not, you order the kit from AmSafe and you get the STC from Alpha. And those two things together let you legally install it. It does install on top of an existing shoulder harness, so you'll need to do both.
That's the airbag, isn't it?
Yes, that's the airbag. Yep.
Yeah, another question, the kits you're talking about, do they all include rear seat harnesses that you're?
No, nope, they all sell them. And by the way, you can custom color your shoulder harness and rear seat belts to your aircraft. So if you go change your interior, you can go ahead and order new shoulder harness webbing to go into your aircraft. And the good news is if your mount points are already in there, it's not like you have to do a complete reinstall. You can just change your webbing. And that also needs to be done every certain number of years because webbing gets old and degrades.
Thanks.
So CJ, my question on the buys is, will these be coming up soon? You'll announce them or post them somewhere?
Yep, we're going to announce them tonight, and then we will be posting everything. So, Pete, is there anything after shoulder harnesses?
I think there's like 4 more things. I'll go through quick.
Okay. Yep. The big thing is this: do not load your airplane aft CG. Those limits are really there for a reason. And in aft CG, your airplane starts to get very pitchy. So don't do it. It's really hard to get a Comanche forward CG. It is possible to get them aft CG. In general, the Comanches are uniquely wonderful because they're kind of like, if it fits, it ships. But like I weigh 107 pounds, and one day I put about 200 pounds in the baggage area, and a very, very wise person looked at me and said, they never thought anybody like you was going to be up front. And I was like, okay. So even the other thing to remember is if you're super light, don't load your baggage area to 200 pounds and just have you up front. But on that FCG, they mean it. Don't load FCG. Any other questions?
These are all combination ones, so that actually was the last one.
Okay, good deal.
These are all just repeats of what they all were.
Right. It's kind of the summary screens. Yep.
Okay,
So
we're
we'll
done.
be publishing this list, and it'll be part of the Zoom, but we'll also put the pre-zone next to the Zoom. Okay, group buys. And first of all, shoulder autopilot updates. And we got really, really amazing and great news on this. One, is Eric Jones, are you still in here? I know he was in earlier. Okay, so updates on Garmin, Genesis, and Trio ProPilot with the STC group. Garmin with the GFC, well, let me start with Genesis because they were planning to be first to market. Genesis does have the servos installed in the 400. Pretty exciting. They were a little bit delayed because the 400 they got in to be their test plane needed to go through annual first, and because otherwise it was going to be needing an annual right in the middle of their test flying. So that created a delay, but they are still expecting to have the Genesis S-Tech 3100 available for all PA24 models from the 180s all the way through the 400s in the beginning to the middle of Q4 2020. Hooray. Thank you to everybody who leaned on Genesis. That's announcement number one. And just a quick thing for anybody who's got an S-Tech. So the price of this for everybody will be $20,000, and then you're looking at a predicted 60-hour install. So kind of ouch. However, if you already have an S-Tech, if you have a single axis S-Tech like the 20s, 40s, and I forget what the other single axis S-Tech is, your upgrade, they will use and honor and guarantee your servos. And so your upgrade path then becomes $12,500, less time spent doing an install because your servos are already in. They will check and service your servos. And as long as you order the S-Tech kit prior to the STC date, so this gives you a little more time, they will give you 3 years warranty on your old servos as well as 2-year warranty on your head. If you've got the 2-axis autopilot, such as the 30, 60, 55X, now you're looking at a roughly $10,000 upgrade path, plus again, a slightly shorter install time. The question mark there has to do with whether you have auto trim or not. So everybody should now cheer because in 2020 we are going to have, and I have more news. So in 2020 we are going to have autopilots plural. And so any questions on the, and then the other big news on the Genesis, and we have great news for the twins tonight. I am so excited. Forgive me, I don't mean to sound like a talk show host, but like the twin drivers have been like for years, what are we gonna get? So both Trio ProPilot and with the STC, thanks to the STC group and a whole bunch of really great people in the Comanche community, and Genesis have said we are going to go and do something for the twins. So since we're on Genesis, they said, if 15 of you twin drivers pre-order the Genesis S-Tech 3100, they will start the certification process for the PA 3039s, the same one they're going through now with the 24s. If you have already got an S-Tech installed in your twin, you are not looking at $20,000 plus lots and lots of money to install it. You are looking at either a $12,500 plus or minus, or $10,000 plus or minus, plus whatever it costs to integrate with your avionics. But please put in your pre-order to Genesis S-Tech unless you would like the other option, which we'll be getting to soon, which is going to be less expensive and a very capable autopilot as well. Any questions about Genesis S-Tech update before I move on to Garmin and Trio ProPilot? Okay, could I please hear a cheer? We have been waiting for this for so long. Yay. Okay. Garmin. And I think Eric Jones was not able to stay on. I talked to him just before this, and So first of all, Garmin gave me a frequently asked questions because we had so many questions on their autopilot Zoom that they said, let's do a FAQ. We will be posting the FAQ to Piper Comanche, to Delphi, and of course, we will also post it on the Northeast Comanche Tribe's website, northeastcomanche.org. So that frequently asked question, they, you know, '50s and 260s. But I am expecting to hear something back from them because they got on the ComancheZOOM and they were like, wait, most of the singles were built prior to 1962. You mean we're missing most of the singles? And so we sent them the grid that Zach Grant provided, and they took that back to corporate. Any questions or comments on the GFC 500? Okay, and now finally the pièce de résistance, Trio Pro Pilot. So when we had our ComancheZOOM, it looked like because of the demand from other aircraft, the Trio and the STC group might not be able to get to the Comanches before 2021. But the company, thanks to this just enormous response from the Comanche community, and I really want to just mention in particular Greg Peel and Hans Newbert and Zach Grant and Mark Sullivan, who 3 of whom are on now. Trio Pro Pilot and the STC group that holds the STC for certificated applications of the Trio Pro Pilot and is doing STCs for various types have agreed to work, and they are now targeting, if our plan comes together, which we think it will, or if the Comanche community shows the interest that it has, that it comes through, then Hans Newbert with his DER and engineering capabilities, Greg Peel, who is a mechanical engineer who actually did the STC for the Cherokees and has a Comanche himself, Mark Sullivan, who has a twin and is an officer in the STC group, and Zach Grant, who just knows all of our insides of all of our aircraft, like he can just rifle through the books in his head, came together along with Matthew Smith to make a plan to provide the design and engineering capabilities working with STC groups. AJ, who's their IA. So the reason that's so exciting is that pulled in the schedule on the Trio Pro Pilot, and the plan includes all of the singles except possibly the 400 and the twins. So we've got an actual physical project plan to get the Comanche STC design completed and done in let's see, in the beginning of Q4 if we're expecting to be able to jump on an FAA slot, or they are. And then a group buy. But since Mark Sullivan, if he is still on, and Greg Peel, do you guys want to make any comments on that?
Mark Sullivan here. Basically, Hans has assured us that the relevant structure in 180s, 250s, 260s, and twins. 400s are a different category, and there really aren't enough of them to make that really a good market for a completely separate project. But assuming the structure is the same, the plan is to get the 180 into our hangar at Oxnard. And what's expediting this is that Greg, Hans, and Zach, well, actually pieces, Zach and Hans, working with the IAA, can greatly accelerate the initial research that the IAA always does, which takes him typically 7 to 10 days to get that all done. We think we can cut that way down with people such as Zach, who knows every longeron by its first name. And then we have to do drawings. That's been a big holdup for us. And Greg is very competent at doing that. And most importantly, Greg's got a 250, which means that Greg, as we do the 180 in California, Greg can prove that that design is working on his 250, that they are the same. we will bring my twin Comanche over to Oxnard. It's a Camarillo, 3 miles away. And as soon as the 180 is installed and we take it up for a test flight and it works fine, then we can put it in the twin. The idea is to submit the paperwork. We'll have to find a willing owner with a 260. We'll do the same with a 260.
That's Matthew Smith, already done.
Oh, beautiful.
In Los Angeles area.
We're going to do the necessary test flight for the FAA, write it up and submit it. That's where the great variable is. The FAA used to do it in 6 weeks. We did the PA-32 and it took 6 months. A bunch of that was COVID. We recognize that. But and they've told us not to send them 2 and 3 projects at a time. So we're going to send them all the Comanches as one project. We think that dog will hunt. But then it's going to sit there. So that if we think we can reasonably get, because the Comanches are all the same, we can reasonably get this all done, the submission part of it by November 1st. So then it's just a matter of how long it takes Chicago to approve it.
Brilliant.
And part of the help, I'm really appreciative that Hans is willing to, to help with the structural engineering, because we have to have that. We have to have a structural engineering report. And we critically have to have really good drawings, and that's what Greg does. And because everybody has, all these people each have a Comanche of their own to actually eyeball, the structures where it's going. We can do in parallel things that we ordinarily do seriatim, and it's much slower. So the parallel production, we think we can do it fairly quickly.
Yep.
Fairly quickly in the world of the FAA isn't glacial, but it should be relatively reasonable. We have one wrinkle that just came at us, though, out of the blue today. Talk about exogenous factors. With aviation, you never know what's going to hit you. We just heard that they're going to be in October closing the Oxnard Airport to redo the runway. So we're like, oh, that's swell. So, but that shouldn't bother us. I mean, most of our operations we used to do with Camarillo. So if we have the 180 done, we can just do the twin Comanche 3 miles down the road at Camarillo. But it is a wrinkle that hit us out of nowhere. But the project, we think we can keep with that schedule. Can't guarantee, but we think we can keep with it. And I'm going to prepare a development, a contract for those people that are, want to put in a deposit. We have to get a minimum number to make sure that this is going to be worthwhile. But we still think delivered, we're going to be significantly cheaper than any competition. And with cable attached, we still think it's going to be a 35-hour install.
Mark, thank you so much. That is, thank you. So I just want to acknowledge that the Comanche community has supported all of the possible autopilots for the Comanches. Eric Jones was crucial to getting the Garmin GFC 500 moving forward and getting people organized to really sort of advocate, agitate to Garmin. And then likewise, owners have really been helpful and supportive of Genesis. And, with Genesis, they came back to me and said, well, can you get me a little bit more info on the twin Comanches? And so Zach Grant literally wrote up a whole thing. He dictated a whole thing that he's now revising to make sure I didn't goof. But that went to Genesis and resulted in them agreeing to commit to do the twin Comanches if enough of us came forward, because they were able to be reassured that the new project would be, wouldn't have a lot of surprises. And that data is also being supplied to STC Group. So our community, all of us, pooling our expertise is helping us get all these autopilots done that we've been waiting for years. And Greg Peel today, I was talking to him a little bit about this project. By the way, Mark, Zach Grant just sent me photographs of the install location for the pitch servo. And so it just nails exactly where it is on that centerline stringer. So I'll be forwarding those to you and Greg tonight. But, and Hans, but back to this. The reason that I want to emphasize the importance of this so much, and Greg said it, he's like, people are saying they have $40,000 airplanes. But the fact that we didn't have modern autopilots available was negatively impacting the values of our whole fleet. And when we have, as STC Group is now committing to do, when we have an autopilot that is available to the entire Comanche fleet that can be installed for a reasonable cost, as the upgrade path for the Genesis S-Techs are, as the Garmin GFC 500 is for those of you with Garmin panels, and particularly as the Trio Pro Pilot is for the whole fleet, the most reasonably cost, because it's coming out of that experimental realm that helps us certificated airplanes so much. This is going to make our airplanes more valuable, more capable, and more viable to the market. So Mark, Hans, Greg, Matthew, and Zach, who's not here, you know, thank you so much. And Eric for everything. Thanks to everyone who has helped make the autopilots possible. And thanks particularly to STC Group, because they just changed their whole process to allow us to help them and not get in the way of critical market opportunities with other older aircraft that we also want to be able to fly with autopilots. Because what helps GA helps all of us. Sorry to sound preachy, but I'm really excited. Any comments or questions about any of these three autopilots?
By the way, let me add one comment just so people understand this, is that, you know, with the non-TSO'd autopilot that we have, the one, it has one, it obviously doesn't have all the analog functions of the more expensive autopilots. You know, all three are really good units. They're just different units for different types of uses. But the one thing that people always ask me is, do I need to have a WAS navigator? And if you're basically VFR and you want an autopilot strictly for safety, and boy, that is the main thing you should think about it for, is safety. You can fly it off a handheld, even a 2001 or 1998 vintage handheld. So it's not strictly for the people with glass panels. And you really should think of it as a safety item.
Wow. Is that true for all of them, or is that true for the Trio Pro Pilot, Mark?
I don't know. I know with ours, because it came out of the experimental community, I would say 80% of the people with long easies and very easies and all the different experimentals are flying them with Garmin 496s and 696s, everything other than an iPad. Anything that lets your iPad won't work with anything. You can't plug into it. But any of the standalone handhelds works fine with it. What it doesn't work with is the real early GPSs, like the KLN89, because the processor's too slow.
We've got a question coming in.
Shoot. Oui, ça finit plus. C'est, veut dire, comment ça, c'est 7h15, 7h15.
Oh, sorry, we've got a stuck mic on somebody coming in from what sounds like Italy. Okay, so is there any other questions or comments?
Hey, CJ, Danny here. Can I ask a question?
By all means, please.
I don't know if any of the members have looked at the Dynon range. I was recently working with, is it John Spielman, about a new panel for my Comanche, and I was looking at the Garmin G3X, and it became obvious. I think I talked about this last week, that it's about half an inch too big to fit between the top of the yoke column and the bottom of the glare shield. I believe that some people are modifying the glare shield to fit. Well, the Dynon is about a half inch smaller, and it appears, I haven't done it yet, but it appears that it will fit. Now, if you look at the Dynon range, unlike the Garmin range, has what they call a GAD29B, which is basically a digital to analog converter, so it can pick up a lot of the old legacy autopilots. The Dynon range doesn't do that. It only supports its own autopilots, and they have a very limited range available for the certified aircraft. They've currently got certification for the Bonanza and the V35 Bonanza, and they're currently working on the Cessna range, and I believe that I heard that they may be working on the PA-28s. I'm just wondering if there was, with the great work that you've obviously done liaising with the autopilot companies, if it mightn't be a bad idea to put the Comanche Society's aircraft numbers in front of Dynon, because it may be a motivation for them to move the PA-24, PA-30 style aircraft up the certification lift for their for this certification. But at this stage, the Comanche range is not on their list whatsoever. And Dynon, as far as I can see, is certainly a rising star in this whole glass panel avionics market. Okay, thank you.
Danny, it's a really good comment. So here's the status of Dynon. Obviously, their non-autopilot stuff did get approved for the PA-24s. Super cool. And you're right, the autopilot is not officially on their list. However, at last Oshkosh, there was a gentleman that we were working with at Comanche Town, which is a huge gathering of Comanches all parking and camping together at Oshkosh and Sun and Fun. That's it. And so Randy was one of our EAA vintage aircraft representatives, and Randy and I, Randy turned out to have a 180 project, and so he and I reached out to Dynon, and he did a great job of prepping them for us to come to Dynon and say, hey, autopilot. So that loop needs to be closed, but it has been opened. There is sort of a connection that's been made and a level of interest. We went and visited Dynon while we were at the show and connected with some of the key people there. I can't make any guarantees whatsoever because it's been a while, and of course Oshkosh got canceled and we had planned to connect with them again in person this year. If you would be really interested in getting the Dynon panel and autopilot, if you could put your interest either into the chat window or send a note to cjstumpf@gmail.com and put Dynon in the heading so that I know to collect. I can do a search on, subject includes Dynon. That will help enormously because I'll be able to bring that interest to Dynon.
My comment
Dynon
came from, they ran a number of Zoominars for AirVenture 2020. And the question of autopilot for the Comanches was brought up in that, and they said basically then that it was that's where they mentioned the PA-28s, but they basically said the Comanches are not on the list. So that only came that information was only from what, 2 weeks ago.
Yes, yeah, we're officially not on the list. That's absolutely correct. So, and with all autopilot vendors, it's expensive to get an STC for a type, and each autopilot vendor really has to make a decision. The reason I emphasize the coordination that has come out of this consortium, the people who've, reached across, all of the functioning organizations and then said to the vendors, look, here's a group of us, is what has caused this change to happen, because Comanches aren't made anymore. And so there is a tendency for the marketplace to view us as uninteresting. The news that there are 4,000 of us still flying worldwide, that we actively upgrade, that we have often got long distance missions, that we fly a lot. If you look at the total times on our airframes, getting that information to the people who we need to have support us has been crucial. And so that's why, Danny, your point's excellent. But in order for Dynon to start to consider us seriously, we would need to show serious interest to them, just as we need to show serious interest to STC Group. And that's going to get us to a group buy special that we'll be announcing tonight briefly. And it's getting pretty late. It's, oh my goodness, it's 9:43. So I guess what I'm going to do is just breeze down this list and then promise that we will be posting. I guess what we're going to need to do is we will post the group buys. We don't usually do this, but I think I'm going to ask everybody who posts ComancheZOOMs if they would be willing, and you all know who you are, you all have your own lists, if they would be willing to email out the group buy specials, or at least a link to where they will be posted so people can see what they are. Because at this point, we'll go through them quickly because I know some of you are staying just to find out what they are, but and then we'll post the details and get that news out to everybody. One thing that would help me right now is if those of you who are left, which looks like about 40, If you could let us know how you heard about this, you know, like who you got your email from or where you saw the event, that'll help us enormously because it'll help us know, make sure that everybody who's interested gets the information. And okay, so Pete, if you're able, throw up the, if you've loaded it, throw up the list and of group by specials. If not, I'm just going to run down my list. And
I don't have it ready.
Okay, no worries. In that case, so shoulder harnesses, Alpha Aviation, which is alphaaviation.com. Tell them you're looking for the Comanche Group by Special. Phil Air, likewise. Alpha also, for those interested, is providing, they actually do special wing jacks for Comanches. Comanches are low to the ground. Regular wing jacks are sometimes a little bit too tall. If you want your own special cool wing jacks just the right height for your Comanche, when you call Alpha Aviation, even if you don't need shoulder harnesses, they are doing the group by special on the wing jacks. And the duration of all these group by specials we'll put onto the announcements. The other thing they've introduced is a portable tail weight. If you've ever had to try to drag your tail weight around your hangar or help your A&P drag the tail weights around his or her hangar, they are super heavy. This is something that's called a portable tail weight. It's on wheels. You can add or subtract weight from it. Super cool. That is, let's see, so those are the shoulder harnesses. We also have group by specials, and forgive me because I sort of got this to Pete very late because normally he's super fast and has all this ready. I just want to stay in order, so bear with me 1 second while I pull up the group by special list in order. And unless somebody's sitting there staring at it and say, CJ, this one's next. Here we go. Okay. Electronic ignitions and magneto systems. These things are cool. The SureFly is a magneto replacement. The Electro Air is a full system. Electronic ignitions are awesome because they save you fuel, give you more power, particularly at altitude, and make hot starting easier. Electro Air adds an induction coil that tends to give you more fuel savings and a little bit more power, but they also cost a little bit more and they are a little bit more costly to install. So if you fly a lot or you're just like a speed demon, you might want the Electro Air electronic ignition. SureFly is a terrific improvement as well. Both of them are going to dramatically reduce maintenance costs because you will no longer need to be doing any service to your magnetos for the life of your engine. With Electro Air, they're expecting a longer life, but even SureFly, they're expecting 2,200 hours before you need to get a new one. So the Electro Air Group I Special, we'll be posting the details of that, but for those of you who saw the last one, which caused us to sell them completely out of stock, they've beat it by a couple of $100. In addition to that, the switch panel for the Electro Air does work on the SureFly. Many people complain that when they're doing their ignition check, a mag check with the SureFly, that they get a weird little stumble. If you get the switch panel, it eliminates that weird little stumble problem. Plus you look cool because you no longer have keyed ignition. So the Electro Air switch panel, which is a savings of over $100 just on that alone, I think it's $135 or $165 versus like $265 list price. That works on the SureFly. In addition, they are throwing that in for those that jump on the group buy special. So Electro Air has a reduction on the Tempest plugs that's very substantial in the fine wire, and the massives are usually only like $32 anyway, so that's a couple bucks off the massives. So the big new news is that the Surefly group buy just came through. It only goes till September 12th. It is 20% off. They have never done that much for anybody else. They are only doing it for the Comanches. And that's open immediately. Order it directly from the Surefly website at surefly.aero, A-E-R-O, and put in Tribe 20 when you do your order. And if you have any questions about what to get, you can contact them and just tell them you want the Tribe 20 group buy discount. Any questions on electronic ignition group buys? Okay. The nice thing about them is they are the only thing that I know of that actually pays you back. Like there's like a point where if you fly 75 hours or more a year, definitely put it in, because in a couple of years, you're actually going to be paying yourself. You're going to completely cover the cost of the electronic ignition or mag replacement and the install, and then you're going to start paying yourself back with reduced fuel burn, reduced maintenance. Prop balancing clinic. We've done this before. So this is mostly going to be interesting initially for this clinic for people who live in the Northeast and middle part of the country. If you happen to be in Pennsylvania, Gullwing Aviation has a Dynavibe. They do prop balancing, and they'll do it for $125 an engine. That generally is something that costs between $250 and $325. The reason prop balancing is great is it makes your plane tend to have less vibration, which is great for your airframe, your exhaust system. You have fewer cracks, less wear in your airframe, less wear in your engine. It also tends to make your cabin quieter, and it makes your airplane a little more efficient. So the offer we have is we develop software to help prop balancing clinic scheduling, which we're happy to make available to anyone, anywhere around the country. We're also happy to explain why it is that our pioneer in doing prop balancing clinics was able to offer this prop balancing at such a reduced cost. We developed kind of a process. If you do a special, you get a bunch of pilots coming in together. We found a way to cause the amount of labor in a prop balancing to be reduced for the guy offering it, so he can do more of them with less time. So first of all, if you're in Eastern Pennsylvania, Kilo Romeo Victor Lima is offering the prop balancing clinics. And they said, even if you're just by yourself and you're not part of the clinic, stop in, say that you're doing the Comanche Group Buy Special, and they'll give you the discount for the prop balancing of your engine. In the meanwhile, if you know of an A&P or any shop that has a good dynamic prop balancing equipment, we're happy to help you anywhere in the world set up these clinics. I pulled the 20 pilots so far. I've pulled half of them that have had prop balancing, and some of them after like, wait, it operates a little differently. Everybody's been super happy. And one person in particular wrote me and was like, we were getting cracks developing and they just stopped after we got our prop balanced. So balance your prop, period. But if you want, we'll help you put together a clinic. If you spread the word on this one, because it's something that we should do. It really helps our airplanes and our airframes. Any questions about prop balancing? All right, and we are going to get through this in 7 minutes because it's getting really late. Next is LED landing and position lights. This is aero lights, and we have an 18% discount. This is these ones may need a 337, but we have some on Comanches. And the key thing about the 337 is what the FSDO that issued the one that we know about for a 250 wanted was really simple. They just wanted to confirm that the LED landing lights and position lights were going to use not more than 80% of capacity, and obviously an LED light's going to draw less than a bulb. And secondly, that there was not interference with comm frequencies, and they were specific. So for those of you who have priced out some of the LED landing lights and position lights, this is like less than half. So we'll be announcing that. We appreciate particularly Andy Davey and Jeremy of Aerolights for working together to create this. And we are hoping that our FSDO is going to also give us a 337. So for the Northeast, but the great thing about a 337 is once you have one, you can add other tail numbers to it. You don't have to go out and redo the whole thing. So we'll be publishing that and a sample 337 that other FSDOs can use to hopefully issue those if your A&P sees it necessary. Finally, or not finally, this is very, very exciting, and this again comes from the STC group and Trio. The Trio Pro Pilot, which is getting a capstan servo created just for Comanches because we need a bit of a longer throw, and because we fly so fast, more force on the capstan, on the servos, has agreed. So we checked with the other autopilot vendors, and they said, hey, we're going to give you an enhanced warranty, and Garmin just said, we're Garmin. But STC Group said, we will work with you guys. So all we are going to say is that we have a stepped agreement, and that if enough Comanches step up, we are looking at a price of as low as $57.95 for a Trio Pro Pilot, autopilot, and install kit if 30 of us step up. And you are looking at an install time because of the locations of the servos and some of the special features of the Trio Pro Pilot. We're looking at by far the shortest install time of any of the autopilots. So I'm super excited to announce all these group buys. Anybody have any questions on any of them?
I want to make one comment so people understand that on all of the autopilots, I know on ours, and I think it's true on all the others, that after it's installed, typically the owner, typical pilot, the usual pilot of the airplane, is going to have to dial it in. You have to set gains, which is basically a process of, we give detailed instructions how to do it, but that can take, I don't know, it varies. Some people dial it in within an hour of flight, others go, 5-6 hours, or just do it on the fly, as they use the autopilot, of you changing the gains until they get where it, directly holds in on heading and pitch. That's not included in the 35 hours. I don't think it's included in everybody else's estimates either, but I don't know that for certain.
I don't know either, Mark, but it's an excellent point. I appreciate you raising it because people have been known to get an autopilot and say, why isn't this thing flying right? And Mark's right, you do need to dial it in for your particular airplane. Good. A2A Simulations provides a Comanche 250 simulator that's fantastic. They've offered us a group buy, and there's one more that I'm now forgetting, but we'll be posting the list. Thank you all for sticking with us so late. Any last questions or comments, or any other any last questions or comments, feel free to just jump in and unmute. If you have anything else you'd like us to negotiate, stick a note into the chat window.
I didn't quite get the price on that Trio Pro Pilot. You broke up just as you were saying the cost.
Oh, the magic words. Well,
Yes.
here's the amazing thing. So list on that is going to be just, it's actually got the lowest list of any of them already. And that was the whole point, is to provide a low-cost autopilot to GA. List on that is $7,000, and that includes both the autopilot head and the servos and the install kit. But until before that STC is issued, for those who sign up, and it's a tiered thing. So if 15 of us sign up, we're gonna move forward, and it's $7,000. But if 30 of us sign up, and that includes singles and twins, as long as there's at least 10 twins, it's $57.95 for everything, and then you just do your install.
Okay, and how do we sign up for that?
That will be in the, well, actually, what you could do right now is, Mark, do you want to have him just send you a note? But the big thing is just to commit and then put $1,000 refundable deposit down. And Mark Sullivan's got a contract that he's putting out. All of the autopilot vendors do this. It's basically you put in a confirmed order. And then in the case of the ProPilot, $1,000 refundable deposit or a commitment to $1,000 refundable deposit. And that's it. When the autopilot's prepared, ready, we'll get the discount.
Yeah, I will send out a deposit agreement that I want people to read and sign before they send any money. And basically what it provides is that, you know, if we don't get, for some reason, don't get it added to our AML, it's refundable. That if we do get it added to the AML within the given time frame, we're looking at, I'm thinking the probable date we're going to have to put on there is like, you know, March 31st or thereabouts, given how slow the FAA's been. If we do get it, then the deposit is the deposit on the purchase, and it's a confirmed purchase. And it's, as I told CJ, it'll be graduated. If we get less than 15 orders, it's, you know, the $7,000. But if we get 15, but less than 20, 15 to 20, $67.50, 20 to 25, $62.50, more than 25 but less than 30, $59.50, $59.95. If we get more than 30, $57.95. Basically, because we can make a group order, a bulk order of the equipment that we need, and that's how we do the discount. But in any event, to answer your question specifically, I will be circulating, or we will put on our website the Comanche deposit agreement. I'll try to have it up tomorrow or the day after. It's www.thestcgroup.llc.com. The website has all the information about the features of the autopilot. It'll have a link to the deposit agreement. There's also agreements going with the Beach C-23 people, Sundowners, Sierras, and with the Globe Swift. So make sure they're different. There's our, we're not going to do anything until we get the 20 deposits in hand. So make sure you find the one for the Comanche.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yep. And this is great. So, and that information will be included on the announcement. And thanks for that, Mark. We've got 8 people wondering where to put their deposits already. So we'll look forward to getting that information to you and getting everybody else going once people know that this is happening.
Yeah, but sure, I want to point out it's really critical we get some balance though. I mean, if we get 15 twin Comanche, you know, deposits, obviously I want to do the twin Comanche. That's my personal interest. But, you know, to make it worthwhile, I really need to get, you know, both, you know, singles and twins. I'm hoping to get some balance so that, because we want to do all. Our company, we've always done all models. We don't cherry pick of the type. You know, like we did C-172s, we did all. And we're trying to do the same with the Comanches, with the exception of the 400, because it is fundamentally so different.
Yeah. Brilliant. And again, thank you, Mark, for making your company work with us. Everybody, the big thing that was huge here is that that the STC group could have done the Moonies with their current servos. They had to do a special one for the Comanches, and they and Chuck, who owns Trio ProPilot, did that. And so we are, and then they were willing to work with the Comanche community experts to sort of be able to allow us to get to the front of the line and move forward right away. So we're really grateful to, especially to STC Group for going to bat, to being willing to work with us, and to Mark for going to bat with his company when they had, like huge push from the Sundowners and huge push from the Moonies and the Globe Swift. So thank you. And thanks to everybody who's worked so hard to get us going forward with Genesis and Garmin as well, because that's been a big but I mean, this is just huge. I'm really looking forward to watching the fleet values over the next year. We may be getting older, but we're getting better.
Well said.
All right, free for all. It's 10 o'clock. The recording's going to stop. Our hardworking ComancheZOOM volunteers, and there are 4 people working behind the scenes to make sure this all goes as smoothly as it does and that the recordings get out there. They're going to get to work getting this all spooled up on their discs and getting it posted. So I just want to thank you all for sticking with it. And thank everybody who stayed until 10. Good Lord.
Good night, everybody.